Contract of Shadows. The Night She Was Taken. Prologue. 3 things Aria Moretti knew for certain as she pushed through the dented back door of Giuseppe's restaurant. First, her feet hurt like they were being stabbed with 1,000 tiny knives. 6 consecutive double shifts would do that to a person. Second, she was never going to clear her father's debt. Not at this rate. Not in this lifetime. Third, the alley behind the restaurant was never this quiet. The November air bit at her exposed skin as she stepped into the narrow passage between brick walls, her breath creating small clouds in the darkness. The usual sounds of the city were muffled here. No honking horns, no distant sirens, no shouting from the bar 2 blocks over. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Aria's hand tightened around her canvas bag, the one that held everything she owned that mattered. Her mother's rosary, $43 in tips, and a photograph of her family before everything fell apart. Before her father's choices had cost him his life and left her drowning in his consequences. She took 2 steps toward the street. The black SUV appeared from nowhere, blocking the alley's exit like a predator cutting off escape. No headlights, no warning, just suddenly there, massive and menacing in the dim glow of the single street lamp. Aria's heart lurched. She spun around, but a second vehicle had materialized behind her, trapping her between them like a mouse in a cage. "Run!" her mind screamed. But where? The walls were too high, the vehicles too close, and her legs, God, her legs felt like cement. The door of the front SUV opened. A man emerged, and the air itself seemed to change, to grow colder, sharper, charged with something dangerous. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of her rent. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting, all sharp angles and brutal beauty. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Cold, calculating, and fixed on her with the intensity of a man who had already decided her fate. Aria's survival instincts, honed by years of living on the edge, screamed a warning. This man was death in expensive clothes. This man was the kind of monster her father had whispered about late at night when he thought she was sleeping, when the debt collectors came calling. This man was a Vitale. He moved toward her with deliberate steps, each footfall echoing off the brick walls. 3 men flanked him, shadows in suits, their hands visible at their sides, but ready to move in an instant. She recognized the configuration. Guards, enforcers, men who did terrible things without question. Aria backed against the wall, her canvas bag clutched to her chest like a shield. Pathetic, as if $43 and a rosary could protect her from this. The man stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his otherwise dark eyes, close enough that she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, gunpowder maybe, or blood, violence. He studied her with the thoroughness of a jeweler examining a diamond. His gaze traveled from her scuffed sneakers to her stained waitress uniform to her face, lingering there with an expression she couldn't read. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? No, that wasn't possible. She'd never seen this man in her life. When he finally spoke, his voice was silk over steel, smooth, refined, and absolutely lethal. Aria Moretti. Not a question, a confirmation. You look like your mother. The mention of her mother, dead 5 years now, sent ice through her veins. Who are you? His lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. It was something colder, something that made her skin crawl. Lorenzo Vitale. He said it like she should know the name, like everyone should know the name. And she did. God help her, she did. Lorenzo Vitale, head of the Vitale crime family, the man her father had stolen from, the man whose money had paid for her mother's cancer treatments, for the apartment they could no longer afford, for every desperate attempt to hold their family together as it fell apart. The man who now owned her father's debt, which meant he owned her. What do you want? Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Small mercies. Lorenzo tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he was solving in real time. Your father took something from me. A great deal of something, actually. $300,000 to be precise. The number punched the air from her lungs. 300,000. She'd known about the debt, but not the magnitude, not this impossible crushing weight. I don't have that kind of money. The words were ash in her mouth. No. His eyes never left hers. You don't. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire about to snap. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm started wailing. The normal world, carrying on while hers crumbled.
But you have something else I need, Lorenzo continued, his voice dropping lower, softer. Somehow, that made it worse. Aria's stomach turned. She'd heard stories about men like this, about what they did to women who couldn't pay, about the brothels in the warehouse district, the girls who disappeared, the ones who came back changed, if they came back at all. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. If this was happening, she wouldn't go down cowering. I'm not interested in whatever you're offering. Something flashed across his face. Surprise, maybe? It was gone before she could be sure. This isn't a negotiation, Miss Moretti. This is me being generous enough to give you a choice. What choice? Between which way you'll destroy me? His jaw tightened, the first crack in his composed exterior. Between paying your father's debt with your life or with 1 year of it. What? Lorenzo reached into his jacket. Aria flinched, but he only pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out to her. She took it with shaking hands, unfolding it to reveal dense legal text swimming before her eyes. Contract, terms, obligations. The words blurred together until 3 phrases jumped out at her like vipers. Marriage arrangement. 1 year duration. All debts cleared upon completion. You're insane. The contract shook in her hands. This is insane. This is business, Lorenzo corrected, his voice cold as winter steel. You have information I need. Access to circles I don't. Your father had connections before he burned them all, and some people still remember the Moretti name with something other than disgust. I need a wife for exactly 1 year. You need your father's debt erased and protection from everyone else he owed money to. Protection? She nearly laughed. From men like you? From men far worse than me. No emotion in his voice, just fact. Your father didn't only owe me money, Miss Moretti. There are others. Others who won't give you a choice at all. Others who would already have taken you if they knew where to look. The words hit like physical blows. She'd known her father's debts were bad, but this was a nightmare made real. And if I refuse? Lorenzo's eyes held hers,
and in their depths she saw something that terrified her more than any threat. Complete, utter indifference to her answer. "Then I walk away. You can take your chances with the others. The Morellis, the Santoros, the Russians who your father tried to play against each other." He paused, letting the names sink like poison. "They won't offer contracts, Aria. They'll just take what they're owed." Her knees wanted to buckle. She locked them, forced herself to stay standing, to think, to find some way out of this impossible situation. But there was no way out. There had never been a way out, not since the moment her father had made his first deal with the devil. 1 year, she whispered, her voice breaking. 1 year, Lorenzo confirmed. "You'll live in my home, attend events as my wife, follow my rules. And at the end of the year, if you fulfilled your obligations, you walk away free, clean slate, new life. I'll even help you disappear if you want." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it absolutely was. "And if I don't fulfill my obligations?" His expression didn't change. "Then you'll wish I'd let the others have you." The threat was quiet, civilized even, but it resonated in her bones. This man could destroy her with a phone call, could make her disappear without a trace, could do things she didn't want to imagine. And yet he was offering her a way out, a terrible, impossible way out, but a way nonetheless. "There's a pen in the car," Lorenzo said, gesturing to the SUV behind him. "Take all the time you need to decide." He checked his watch with deliberate slowness. "You have 60 seconds. Aria's hands clenched around the contract. 60 seconds to decide the rest of her life. 60 seconds to choose between certain death and uncertain slavery. She thought of her mother's rosary in her bag, of the photograph of her family, of the life she'd been clinging to with bleeding fingertips, the life that had been crumbling around her since the day her father had put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger. 1 year. Just 1 year. She could survive anything for 1 year. Couldn't she? "I need your word," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "That you won't." She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the fear that had been clawing at her throat since this nightmare began. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed, understanding flickering across his face. "You have my word that I will not touch you in any way you do not explicitly consent to. This is a business arrangement, Miss Moretti. Nothing more." The words should have been comforting. They weren't. There was something in the way he said them, something in the tightness around his eyes that suggested this was costing him, that he was forcing the promise through gritted teeth. Why? 30 seconds, Lorenzo said. Aria looked down at the contract in her hands, at the dense legal text that would bind her to this man, this monster, this beautiful demon in expensive clothes. Her vision blurred with unshed tears. She'd spent her entire life paying for her father's mistakes. What was 1 more year? "I'll need a pen," she whispered. Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or relief. He snapped his fingers, and one of his men materialized with a fountain pen. Expensive, heavy, the kind of pen that signed away kingdoms. Or lives. She took it with trembling fingers, braced the contract against the brick wall, and signed her name at the bottom. Aria Catherine Moretti. The signature looked foreign, like it belonged to someone else, someone who had made a deal with the devil and sealed her fate in ink. Lorenzo took the contract, glanced at her signature, and folded it back into his jacket. "Good. My men will collect your things from your apartment.
You won't be going back there. Wait! You signed the contract, Miss Moretti. The terms are clear. From this moment forward, you belong to me. He turned toward the SUV, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. One more thing. That man you were serving tonight, the one at table 7 who left you the $50 tip and his phone number? Ice flooded her veins. How did he know about that? Had he been watching her? For how long? He works for the Santoros, Lorenzo continued, his voice casual, conversational. They sent him to get close to you, to gain your trust, to take you somewhere quiet where they could extract every penny your father owed them from your flesh. He let that sink in. So you can thank me later for saving you from that particular fate. Aria's stomach heaved. The nice customer, the one who'd seemed genuinely kind, who'd asked about her day, who'd left that generous tip and his number with a shy smile. A trap. It had all been a trap. Lorenzo opened the door of the SUV, the interior lights spilling out like a gateway to another world. Come, Aria, your new life is waiting. She should run, should scream, should fight. Instead, she walked forward on numb legs, her canvas bag clutched to her chest, and climbed into the back of the SUV. The leather seats were soft, the interior warm, the air scented with leather and that same dangerous cologne. Lorenzo slid in beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He knocked twice on the divider between them and the driver, and the vehicle began to move. Aria watched through the tinted windows as the alley, the restaurant, her old life slipped away into the darkness. Tears finally escaped, tracking hot paths down her cold cheeks. Don't cry. Lorenzo's voice was surprisingly gentle. You made the right choice. She turned to look at him through her tears, at this beautiful monster who had bought her like property, who held her fate in his perfectly manicured hands. Did I? His jaw tightened. He looked away, toward the window, toward the city lights blurring past. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet she almost missed it. Ask me again in a year. The SUV carried them into the night, leaving behind the life Aria had known, and carrying her toward a future she couldn't fathom. She didn't know that Lorenzo had been watching her for 3 months. She didn't know about the photograph hidden in his desk drawer, the one of a woman who looked remarkably like her, a woman who had died screaming his name. She didn't know about the war brewing in the underworld, or that she had just become its most valuable piece. Most of all, she didn't know that Lorenzo Vitale had just told her his first lie. Because this was never just business. Chapter 1. The House of Ghosts. The Vitale estate materialized from the darkness like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and iron, towering against the night sky with a presence that whispered of old money and older sins. Aria pressed her face closer to the SUV's window, watching as the massive wrought iron gates swung open without anyone touching them. Security cameras tracked their movement. She could feel them watching, recording, cataloging her arrival like evidence at a crime scene. Which, she supposed, this was. The scene of her voluntary imprisonment. The driveway stretched for what felt like miles, flanked by manicured hedges that probably cost more to maintain than she'd made in her entire life. Lights illuminated the path ahead, growing brighter as they approached the main house, a 3-story masterpiece of stone and glass that seemed to go on forever. It's a bit much, Aria said, her voice rough from crying. She hadn't meant to speak, but the silence in the car had become suffocating. Lorenzo glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the dim interior light. "You'll get used to it." "Will I?" She turned to face him fully. "I signed a contract to be your wife for a year, not to live in a museum." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "This museum has 63 rooms, 2 kitchens, a wine cellar that could survive a nuclear winter, and enough security to protect a head of state. You'll find it more comfortable than Giuseppe's back alley." The casual mention of where he'd found her, like he'd plucked her off a shelf at a store, sent anger flaring through her grief. "And which room will be my cell?" Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "You're not a prisoner." "Really?" Aria laughed, the sound bitter. "Can I leave?" "No." "Then I'm a prisoner." The SUV came to a stop in front of a fountain, an elaborate affair featuring marble horses frozen mid-leap. The front doors of the house opened, and a woman emerged at the top of the stone steps. Older, 60 maybe, dressed in a crisp black dress that screamed housekeeper or major domo or whatever rich people called their staff. Lorenzo exited the vehicle without another word, and after a moment's hesitation, Aria followed. The night air hit her again, colder here than in the city, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and something floral she couldn't identify. "Mrs. Chen will show you to your room," Lorenzo said, already moving toward the house. "Get some rest. We'll discuss your obligations in the morning." "Wait," Aria took a step forward. "You can't just—" He turned, and the look in his eyes stopped her mid-sentence. Cold, distant, nothing like the man who'd told her not to cry in the car. This was Lorenzo Vitale, the crime boss, the man who could order deaths with a phone call, the man who'd bought her like property. "I can do whatever I want, Miss Moretti. You'd do well to remember that." He disappeared through the front doors, leaving her standing in the cold with her canvas bag and her shattered pride. Mrs. Chen descended the steps with the grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Up close, she was beautiful in that timeless way some Asian women achieved. Smooth skin, sharp eyes, and a posture that suggested she could break Aria in half if necessary. "Miss Moretti." Her accent was British, clipped and proper. "Welcome to the Vitale estate. I'm Mrs. Chen, the estate manager. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters." Aria wanted to refuse, wanted to demand answers, explanations, some kind of orientation for this nightmare. But exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and suddenly all she wanted was to be alone. She followed Mrs. Chen up the steps and through doors that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The interior made the exterior look modest. Marble floors stretched in every direction, reflecting the light from a chandelier that could have doubled as a small sun. A grand staircase swept upward, splitting into 2 directions on the second floor. The main level houses Mr. Vitale's offices, the formal dining room, the library, and several sitting rooms, Mrs. Chen explained as they climbed the stairs. Her voice had the practiced quality of a tour guide. The second floor contains the family quarters and guest suites. The third floor is generally not in use. "Generally?" Aria's voice echoed in the vast space. Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change. "The third floor contains Mr. Vitale's private quarters. You're not to go there without explicit permission." Of course, even within his own house, Lorenzo kept himself separate, untouchable. They reached the second floor, and Mrs. Chen led her down a hallway lined with paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. Landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces that probably had meanings Aria would never understand. She stopped in front of a door about midway down the corridor. "This will be your room." Mrs. Chen opened the door, revealing a space that made Aria's entire apartment look like a closet. The room was decorated in shades of cream and gold, with furniture that looked antique and probably was. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, its linens so white they seemed to glow. French doors opened onto what appeared to be a balcony. A sitting area occupied one corner, complete with a fireplace that Aria suspected actually worked. "The closet is through there." Mrs. Chen pointed to a door Aria had missed. "The bathroom is adjacent. You'll find toiletries and other necessities already stocked. Your clothing will arrive tomorrow." "I have clothing," Aria protested, gesturing to her canvas bag. Mrs. Chen's expression suggested she'd seen the contents of the bag and found them wanting. "Mr. Vitale has arranged for a wardrobe appropriate to your new position. The stylist will be here at 9 tomorrow morning for fittings." Her new position, as if being someone's contracted wife was a job title. "Is there anything else you need this evening, Miss Moretti?" About 1,000 things. Answers, explanations, her old life back. But Aria just shook her head. "No, thank you." Mrs. Chen nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the door. "A word of advice, if I may." Aria looked up, surprised by the softening in the woman's voice. "Don't wander the house at night. Some doors are better left closed." Mrs. Chen's eyes held a warning Aria couldn't interpret. "And if you hear anything unusual, ignore it. This is an old house. It makes sounds." Before Aria could ask what that meant, Mrs. Chen was gone, the door clicking shut with a finality that made Aria's stomach clench. Alone at last, Aria dropped her canvas bag on the floor and sank onto the edge of the bed. The mattress was absurdly comfortable, the kind of bed she only seen in hotels she could never afford. Everything in this room probably cost more than she'd earn in 10 years of waitressing. And it was all hers, for 1 year. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a noose tightening around her neck. She stood and moved to the French doors, unlocking them to step out onto the balcony. The night air was sharp and clear, carrying none of the city's pollution. From here, she could see the estate's grounds stretching into darkness, gardens, what might be a pool, the outline of other buildings she couldn't identify. Beautiful. All of it beautiful. And she hated every inch of it. Aria gripped the balcony railing, fighting the urge to scream, to cry, to throw herself over the edge and end this nightmare before it truly began. But she wouldn't. She'd survived her mother's death, her father's suicide, years of crushing poverty and fear. She could survive this too. She had to. Movement caught her eye, a light in one of the third-floor windows. Lorenzo's private quarters, according to Mrs. Chen. As she watched, a figure appeared in the window. Too dark to see clearly, but she knew it was him. Could feel his gaze on her like a physical touch. They stared at each other across the distance, two strangers, bound by a contract neither of them wanted, but both needed. Then the light went out, and Lorenzo disappeared into the darkness of his fortress. Aria shivered and retreated into her room, locking the French doors behind her. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion won. She managed to wash her face in the bathroom, which was larger than her old bedroom and featured a tub that could fit 3 people, and changed into the only sleep clothes she owned, a worn t-shirt and shorts. The bed swallowed her whole. She lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, trying not to think about everything she'd lost in the span of a few hours. Mrs. Chen was right about the house making sounds. Old wood settling, pipes groaning, wind rattling windows. But there were other noises too. Footsteps in distant hallways. Doors opening and closing. Once, she could have sworn she heard a woman crying, though when she held her breath to listen, there was only silence. Some doors are better left closed. What did that mean? What secrets did this house hold? Aria pulled the covers up to her chin and tried to ignore the feeling that she was being watched. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover, and the sound of someone moving in her room. Aria sat up with a gasp, heart hammering, only to find a young woman arranging clothes in the massive closet she'd glimpsed the night before. "Good morning, Miss Moretti." The woman turned with a bright smile. She was petite, dark-haired, probably in her early 20s. "I'm Sophia, one of the housekeeping staff. Mrs. Chen sent me to help you get ready for your appointment with the stylist." Aria glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 8:30. She'd slept later than she had in years. "I can dress myself," Aria said, more sharply than intended. Sophia's smile didn't falter. "Of course. I've laid out some temporary clothes for you in the bathroom, just basics until your wardrobe arrives. There's also coffee and breakfast waiting in your sitting area whenever you're ready." She gestured to the corner Aria had barely noticed last night, where a small table now held covered dishes and a coffee service that looked like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant. "I didn't hear you come in," Aria said, unease crawling up her spine. "We're trained to be discreet." Sophia moved toward the door. "Ring if you need anything. The button is on the nightstand." She was gone before Aria could formulate a response. Trained to be discreet, meaning they could enter her room at any time without her knowledge, meaning she had no privacy, meaning this beautiful cage had invisible bars. The shower was a revelation. Multiple shower heads, water pressure that felt like a massage, and enough hot water to last forever. Aria stood under the spray longer than necessary, letting it wash away the grime and fear of the previous night. The clothes Sophia had left were simple but expensive. Dark jeans that actually fit, a soft cashmere sweater in deep green, underwear that was definitely not from a discount store. Everything in her size. Because of course Lorenzo had known her measurements, had probably known everything about her for months. The thought made her skin crawl. She ate breakfast mechanically. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit that tasted like it had been picked that morning. The coffee was perfect. Everything was perfect. She wanted to hate it, wanted to refuse it all on principle. But God, when had she last eaten food this good? At precisely 9 o'clock, someone knocked on her door. Aria opened it to find a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Tall, angular, dressed head to toe in black, with platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. Aria Moretti. Her accent was French, her smile professional. "I'm Monique. Mr. Vitale has hired me to outfit you appropriately for your new role." Behind Monique stood 2 assistants carrying garment bags and several large cases. "This really isn't necessary," Aria began. "I'm afraid Mr. Vitale disagrees." Monique swept past her into the room, her assistants following. "You'll be attending events where appearance matters, where you'll be photographed, scrutinized, judged. We need to make sure you're prepared." The next 2 hours were a blur of measuring, photographing, and having clothes held up against her body while Monique made notes on a tablet. Evening gowns, cocktail dresses, business suits, casual wear, all of it designer, all of it absurdly expensive. "You have an interesting figure," Monique mused, circling Aria like a predator. "Not typical runway, but there's something classical about your proportions. We can work with this." Aria bit back a retort. Being analyzed like a piece of meat was degrading, but arguing wouldn't help. She'd signed the contract. This was part of her obligations. "Your coloring is lovely," Monique continued. "Dark hair, fair skin, those eyes, very Snow White. We'll emphasize that.
Rich jewel tones, classic cuts, nothing too trendy. Mrs. Vitale should look elegant, timeless. Mrs. Vitale. The words landed like a punch. I'm not actually... Aria stopped herself. What was the point? In the eyes of everyone here, everyone who mattered, she was Mrs. Vitale. Or would be soon enough. Monique's expression softened slightly. I know this must be overwhelming, but try to see it as armor. The right clothes, the right appearance, it's protection in this world. Trust me. There was something in her tone that made Aria look at her more closely. Monique's professional mask had slipped, revealing something that looked almost like sympathy. You've done this before, Aria said. Dressed someone for this life. Monique's mask snapped back into place. I've dressed many women for many roles. Now, let's look at shoes. By the time Monique and her assistants left, Aria felt like she'd been through a military drill. Her closet, previously empty, now held more clothes than she'd owned in her entire life. Suits for business meetings she didn't know she'd be attending, gowns for galas she didn't want to imagine, casual clothes so expensive they made her nervous to touch them. And jewelry. God, the jewelry. Monique had left several pieces for Mr. Vitale to review. Necklaces, bracelets, earrings that probably cost more than her father's debt. Aria stood in the middle of her closet, surrounded by wealth she'd never dreamed of having, and felt more poor than ever. Impressive, isn't it? She spun to find Lorenzo leaning against her bedroom doorframe, hands in the pockets of what was probably a $10,000 suit. How long had he been there? You should knock, Aria said, hating how breathless she sounded. It's my house. He pushed off the doorframe and walked into the room with the confidence of someone who owned everything he touched. How did the fitting go? Fine. Aria crossed her arms, though I still don't understand why all this is necessary. Lorenzo moved to the window, looking out over the grounds with his back to her. Because appearances matter in my world. Because people will be watching you, judging you, looking for weaknesses. Because you need to look like you belong at my side, not like someone I pulled out of a restaurant. The words stung more than they should have. I see. I'm not good enough as I am. He turned, and something in his expression made her breath catch. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Lorenzo closed the distance between them in 3 strides. Suddenly he was there, close enough that she could smell his cologne again, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and dangerous. The clothes, the jewelry, the etiquette lessons you'll be starting next week, none of it is about changing who you are. It's about protecting you. The people in my world eat girls like you alive. They'll look for any excuse to hurt you, to use you against me. I won't let that happen. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why do you care if they hurt me? I'm just a contract to you. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. His hand lifted, as if to touch her face, then dropped back to his side. You're more than that. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she didn't understand. I don't understand you, Aria whispered. 1 minute you're cold, the next you're this. Which one is real? Lorenzo's jaw clenched. He stepped back, and the distance felt like a physical thing. Both. Neither. It doesn't matter. He moved toward the door, then paused. Dinner is at 7. Mrs. Chen will show you to the dining room. We need to discuss the terms of our arrangement in more detail. Lorenzo. She didn't know why she called his name, didn't know what she wanted to say. He stopped, but didn't turn around. Thank you, Aria said finally, for the warning. about the man at the restaurant. His shoulders tensed. Don't thank me. I'm not doing any of this to be kind. Then he was gone, leaving Aria alone with her expensive new clothes and more questions than answers. She spent the afternoon exploring the second floor, carefully avoiding the stairs that led to Lorenzo's private domain. The house was even larger than she'd realized. Endless hallways, countless rooms, each more opulent than the last. But it was the library that captured her attention. 3 stories tall, with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a spiral staircase connecting the levels. It smelled of leather and old paper, and something indefinable that made her throat tight. Her mother had loved libraries. Aria wandered among the shelves, running her fingers along spines, reading titles. First editions, signed copies, rare volumes that belonged in museums. But also normal books, mysteries, romances, classics she'd read in high school. In a corner on the second level, she found a reading nook with a window overlooking the gardens. Someone had left a book there, face down, spine cracked, a bookmark protruding from near the end. Jane Eyre, her mother's favorite.
Aria picked it up, intending to place it back on a shelf, when she noticed the book plate inside the front cover. Elegant script announced, "From the Library of Elena Vitale." Elena, the name meant nothing to her, but something about it raised goosebumps on her arms. "That's not your book." Aria jumped, nearly dropping it. Mrs. Chen stood at the top of the spiral staircase, her expression unreadable. "I was just—" Aria held up the book. "I wasn't trying to take it. I just—" "That section of the library is off limits." Mrs. Chen's voice was ice. "Please put the book back and come with me." Aria carefully replaced Jane Eyre exactly where she'd found it and followed Mrs. Chen down the spiral staircase. The housekeeper's silence was oppressive, heavy with disapproval. "Who was Elena Vitale?" Aria asked as they reached the main floor. Mrs. Chen stopped so abruptly that Aria nearly ran into her. The older woman turned, and for the first time, Aria saw real emotion in her face. Fear. "That name is not to be spoken in this house. Do you understand?" "But do you understand, Miss Moretti?" Aria nodded, her mouth dry. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "It's for your own protection. Some ghosts are better left undisturbed." She glanced at her watch. "It's nearly 7. You should change for dinner. Mr. Vitale prefers formal attire in the evening." Of course he did. Aria changed into one of the dresses Monique had left, a simple black sheath that hugged her curves in ways that made her self-conscious. She attempted to do something with her hair, but gave up and left it loose around her shoulders. Mrs. Chen collected her at 7 exactly and led her through hallways she didn't recognize to a dining room that looked like it could seat 20 people comfortably. The table was set for 2, one at each end, a distance that felt deliberately calculated. Lorenzo was already there, standing by the windows with a glass of amber liquid. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression made her stomach flip. He looked at her the way a drowning man looks at air. Then he blinked, and the moment passed. His face became that cold mask she was beginning to recognize. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the place setting nearest him, not at the far end of the table, but close enough that they could actually have a conversation. Aria took the seat, hyper-aware of his proximity. Staff appeared from nowhere, serving wine, placing dishes before them with practiced efficiency. The food was beautiful, probably delicious, but Aria barely tasted it. "We need to establish ground rules," Lorenzo said once the staff had retreated. "Parameters for our arrangement. I already signed your contract." The contract covers the legal aspects. This is about the practical ones. He set down his fork with deliberate precision. You'll attend events with me, fundraisers, business dinners, family gatherings. You'll play the role of devoted wife. You'll learn what you need to know about my business and my enemies. You'll follow Mrs. Chen's instructions regarding security. And in exchange? In exchange, you're safe, fed, clothed, protected. Your father's other debts disappear. No one touches you. No one threatens you. You have access to anything in this house except your private quarters and Elena's books. The name slipped out before Aria could stop it. Lorenzo's glass shattered in his hand. The sound was shocking in the quiet room. Blood bloomed across his palm, mixing with the amber liquid as it dripped onto the white tablecloth. Lorenzo! Aria started to stand, but he held up his uninjured hand. Don't. His voice was strangled. Don't say that name. Don't ever say that name in my presence. Staff appeared, cleaning up the glass, bandaging his hand. Lorenzo stood perfectly still through it all, his eyes fixed on something Aria couldn't see. When they were alone again, he spoke without looking at her. There are parts of my life that are close to you, parts you don't need to understand, parts you don't want to understand. Stay out of them. I didn't mean... I know. He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes stole her breath. But it doesn't matter. Some doors need to stay closed, Aria, for both our sakes. He left without another word, leaving her alone in the vast dining room with uneaten food and 1,000 questions burning in her throat. That night, Aria dreamed of a woman she'd never met. Dark-haired, beautiful, standing at the window in a flowing dress. The woman turned, and Aria saw her own face reflected back. Then the woman opened her mouth and screamed, and Aria woke gasping in her beautiful prison, knowing with absolute certainty that she was living in the shadow of a ghost named Elena, who looked just like her. Chapter 2. Lessons in Survival. The etiquette instructor arrived exactly 1 week after Aria's first disastrous dinner with Lorenzo. 7 days of carefully orchestrated avoidance. 7 days of Lorenzo leaving the house before she woke and returning after she'd retreated to her room. 7 days of meals taken alone in the vast dining room. Of exploring the house with Mrs. Chen's warnings echoing in her head. Of trying desperately not to think about the ghost who wore her face. The instructor's name was Vivian St. James, and she looked like she'd stepped out of a 1950s finishing school. Perfectly coiffed silver hair, pearls at her throat, posture so straight it probably gave her back spasms. Miss Moretti. Vivian's voice was crystal and ice, her handshake precisely firm enough to convey authority without aggression. Mr. Vitale has hired me to prepare you for society. We have a great deal of work to do and very little time to do it. Aria bit back a retort about not being a project. The woman wasn't wrong. Aria knew nothing about the world Lorenzo inhabited. She'd spent the last 5 years serving people who lived in it, never imagining she'd be expected to join them. What exactly will these lessons cover? Aria asked, as Vivian settled into one of the library's leather chairs with the air of a general surveying a battlefield. Everything. Vivian pulled out a leather-bound planner. Table manners, conversational etiquette, proper forms of address, how to handle the press, wine selection, art appreciation, basic Italian. Italian? Mr. Vitale's business associates often conduct conversations in Italian. You'll need to at least understand what's being said, even if you don't speak it fluently. Vivian consulted her notes. We'll also cover the major players in his world. Who to trust,
who to avoid, who to never turn your back on. That got Aria's attention. You know about his business?
Vivian's expression didn't change. I've trained 3 wives for men in similar positions. I know exactly what world you're entering, Miss Moretti. That's why I'm here, to make sure you survive it. The word choice was deliberate. Not succeed, not thrive, survive. The first lesson was humbling. Vivian watched Aria eat lunch with the intensity of a hawk observing prey, correcting every movement. Fork in the left hand, knife in the right. No, don't switch them between bites. That's American style. You're dining with Europeans. Keep your wrists above the table. Smaller bites. Never, ever check your phone at the table. Aria wanted to throw the fork across the room. This is ridiculous. Does it really matter which hand holds the knife? Yes. Vivian's tone brooked no argument. Because these people will judge everything about you. They'll watch how you eat, how you sit, how you speak. They'll look for any sign that you don't belong, any weakness they can exploit. And when they find it, they'll use it against Mr. Vitale. The reminder of what was at stake, Lorenzo's position, his power, his safety, made Aria's hands steady. She picked up the fork again. Show me. Something that might have been approval flickered across Vivian's face. By the 3rd hour, Aria's head was spinning with rules about which fork to use for which course, how to signal to waiters that she was finished, the proper way to refuse wine without offending the host. It was like learning a new language, one where every gesture had meaning and every mistake could be fatal. Now, Vivian said, setting down her own fork with perfect precision, let's discuss the people you'll encounter. She produced a leather folder containing photographs and dossiers. The first showed a heavy-set man in his 60s with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Marco Santoro, Vivian said, head of the Santoro family, Mr. Vitale's primary rival. He's ruthless, cunning, and holds a personal grudge against Mr. Vitale that goes back years. Never be alone with him. Never accept anything he offers. Food, drink, even a handshake if you can avoid it. Aria stared at the photograph, memorizing every detail. This was the man who'd sent someone to her restaurant. The man who would have taken her if Lorenzo hadn't gotten there first. What's the grudge about? She asked. Vivian's pause was infinitesimal, but Aria caught it. That's not information I'm privy to. You'll have to ask Mr. Vitale. Which meant it had something to do with Elena. Everything in this house seemed to circle back to that forbidden name. The next photograph showed a beautiful woman in her 40s, dark hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes like a predator's. Isabella Morelli, Vivian continued, widow of the former Morelli boss, now acting head of the family. She's brilliant, dangerous, and has never forgiven Mr. Vitale for refusing her daughter's hand in marriage 3 years ago. Aria's eyebrows rose. He was engaged before? Proposed, Vivian corrected. Isabella wanted to unite the families. Mr. Vitale declined, rather publicly. She flipped to the next photograph. Isabella is clever and patient. She'll smile at you, compliment you, make you think she's your friend. She's not. She's looking for any information she can use against Mr. Vitale. More photographs followed, each with their own warnings and histories. The Russian mob boss who controlled the docks, the politician on Lorenzo's payroll, the federal agent who'd been trying to build a case against the Vitale family for a decade. By the time Vivian closed the folder, Aria felt like she'd been dropped into the middle of a chess game where every piece wanted to kill her. I can't remember all this, she said, her voice small. You will. Vivian's certainty was absolute, because your life depends on it, and possibly Mr. Vitale's as well.
That evening, for the first time since the disastrous dinner, Lorenzo appeared for the meal. He entered the dining room at exactly 7, looking exhausted in a way that expensive suits couldn't hide. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally perfect hair showed signs of having been run through with agitated fingers. "How was your first day with Vivian?" he asked, taking the seat beside her rather than at the far end of the table. "Progress, maybe." "Terrifying," Aria admitted. "I had no idea eating soup could be so complicated." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "Vivian is the best. Demanding, but thorough. She showed me photographs of the people I'll meet." Aria carefully used the correct fork, salad, left side, as staff served the first course. Marco Santoro, Isabella Morelli, others. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "What did she tell you about them? That they're dangerous, that I should never trust them, that they'd use me against you if they could." She set down her fork, looking at him directly. "She said Santoro has a personal grudge against you. What did you do to him?" "I took something he wanted." Lorenzo's voice was flat, but his hand clenched around his wine glass. "Something he believed was his by right. Territory? Money? Something more valuable than either." He took a long drink of wine, his eyes distant. "Something I'd die before giving back." The way he said it made Aria's breath catch. This wasn't about business. This was personal, deeply personal. "Elena?" she whispered, the name escaping before she could stop it. Lorenzo's glass hit the table with enough force to make the silverware jump. "I told you not to speak that name. How can I avoid what I don't understand?" Aria's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. "There's a ghost in this house, Lorenzo. A ghost who looks like me. A ghost whose name makes you bleed and rage and disappear for days. If I'm supposed to survive your world, I need to know what happened to her." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against marble. For a moment, Aria thought he'd leave again. Instead, he moved to the windows, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "She was my fiancée," he said finally, his voice so quiet she almost missed it. "We grew up together. Her family and mine were allies. Everyone assumed we'd marry eventually. And we were going to. We'd set a date, sent invitations, planned a future." Aria waited, barely breathing. 3 weeks before the wedding, she was taken, kidnapped from this house while I was away on business. The Santoros claimed responsibility. They wanted, his voice cracked, they wanted territories I'd taken from them, ports, distribution routes. They thought they could force me to give them back by taking her. Aria's heart constricted. What happened? I refused. The words were stones falling into water. I told them I'd never negotiate with terrorists, that if they hurt her, I'd erase their entire bloodline from existence. He turned to face her, and the raw agony in his eyes made her want to look away. They killed her anyway. Sent me her body 3 days later with a note. "You should have given us what we wanted." "Oh, God." Aria pressed her hand to her mouth. "Lorenzo." "I killed Marco Santoro's son for it. His nephew, 6 of his top men. Started a war that lasted 2 years and cost both our families everything." He moved back to the table, but didn't sit. "The only reason we have a truce now is because we'd have destroyed each other completely otherwise. But Santoro will never forgive me, and I'll never forgive him." Aria understood now. The forbidden rooms, the violent reaction to Elena's name, the way he'd looked at her that first night, like he was seeing a ghost. "I look like her," she said. "Don't I?" Lorenzo's silence was answer enough. "Is that why you chose me? Because I remind you of her?" "No." He sank into his chair like the weight of the world had finally become too much. I chose you because your father's connections could give me leverage I need. Because having a Moretti as my wife sends a message to my enemies. Because, he stopped, jaw working, because you needed saving, and I'm tired of failing to save people. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. But yes, he continued, his voice dropping, when I first saw you, I thought, he made a frustrated gesture, I thought I was hallucinating, that grief had finally driven me mad. You have her eyes, her face, even some of her mannerisms. It's cruel, Aria finished. Yes, she should have been angry, should have felt used, manipulated. Instead, she felt something she didn't want to name. Pity, maybe, or understanding. This man had loved someone enough to start a war over her death, had loved someone enough that seeing Aria's face was torture. I can't be her, Aria said softly. I won't even try. I know. Lorenzo looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. I don't want you to be. Elena is dead. She's been dead for 3 years. And he stopped, shook his head. I need to let her rest. Then why keep her things? Why preserve her rooms like a shrine? Because I'm a coward. The confession seemed to cost him. Because letting go means admitting she's really gone. Because, his voice broke. Because I failed her, Aria. I chose pride over her life, and she died for it. How do I let that go?
Aria didn't think. She stood and moved to him, placing her hand over his where it rested on the table. His skin was warm, his fingers trembling slightly. You don't, she said. You carry it. You learn to live with it, but you don't let it destroy you. She squeezed his hand gently. She wouldn't want that, would she? Lorenzo looked at their joined hands like he couldn't quite believe they were real. When he lifted his eyes to hers, they were bright with unshed tears. No, he whispered. She'd be furious that I'm still wallowing. She'd tell me to stop being an idiot and live. Then maybe you should listen to her. They stayed like that for a long moment, connected by grief and understanding. Then Lorenzo carefully withdrew his hand, the walls coming back up. Your first event is Friday, he said, his voice returning to business. A charity gala. All the families will be there. It will be your debut as my wife. The abrupt change in subject was jarring, but Aria understood. He'd revealed more than he'd intended. Now he needed distance. That's only 5 days away, she protested. Vivian will prepare you, and I'll be with you the entire time. He stood, straightening his jacket. No one will hurt you, Aria, I promise. The way you promised Elena? The words were out before she could stop them. Lorenzo froze, his face going white. I'm sorry, Aria said quickly. I didn't mean. You're right. His voice was hollow. I made her the same promise, and I failed. So you have every reason to doubt me. He moved toward the door, then paused. But I'm asking you to trust me anyway, because the alternative is worse for both of us. He left before she could respond. That night, Aria couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Lorenzo had told her. About Elena, about the Santoros, about the war that had been fought over a woman's body. Around midnight, she heard it, a sound that had become familiar over the past week. Footsteps in the hallway above her, pacing, back and forth, hour after hour. Lorenzo couldn't sleep either. The sound should have annoyed her. Instead, it was strangely comforting to know she wasn't the only one haunted by ghosts. The next 4 days passed in a blur of lessons. Vivian drilled her relentlessly on names, faces, proper responses to various scenarios,
how to deflect invasive questions, how to read a room, how to never, ever show weakness. When Isabella Morelli approaches you, and she will, she'll compliment your dress, your hair, your jewelry. She'll ask where you and Mr. Vitale met. She'll seem genuinely interested. She's not. She's probing for information. So what do I tell her? Aria asked. The truth, carefully edited. You met through business connections. You were drawn to his intelligence and strength. He pursued you relentlessly until you agreed to marry him. Keep it vague. Keep it romantic. Give her nothing she can use. They practiced conversations until Aria could recite appropriate responses in her sleep. Practiced walking in heels, a skill she'd never needed as a waitress in comfortable shoes. Practiced the art of the meaningless smile. You're a quick study, Vivian admitted on the fourth day. Most of my students take weeks to grasp what you've learned in days. I spent 5 years reading people for tips, Aria said, figuring out what they wanted to hear, how to make them like me. This isn't that different. It's exactly that, Vivian corrected, but the stakes are much higher. These people don't leave bad tips when displeased. They leave bodies. Friday arrived with the inevitability of an execution. Aria spent the morning trying not to panic, the afternoon with a team of stylists who transformed her into someone she barely recognized. The dress Monique had chosen was stunning, a deep emerald silk that hugged her curves before flowing to the floor. Simple but elegant, with a neckline that showed just enough skin to be interesting without being scandalous. The jewelry was antique, a necklace and earrings that probably belonged in a museum. Her hair had been swept up into an elaborate arrangement that looked effortless but had taken an hour to create. Her makeup was subtle but perfect, emphasizing her eyes, the eyes that apparently haunted Lorenzo with memories of a dead woman. When she looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back, someone polished and sophisticated, someone who belonged in Lorenzo's world, someone who wasn't her at all.
Lorenzo was waiting for her at the bottom of the grand staircase. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than she used to make in a year, and when he looked up at her descent, something in his expression made her stumble. Not the cold mask, not the careful distance, something raw and unguarded that disappeared the moment she reached the bottom step. He stopped, cleared his throat. You'll do. The word should have stung. Instead, Aria found herself fighting a smile, because she'd seen what he'd almost said, had felt it in the way his eyes had traveled over her face. So will you, she said. His lips quirked, not quite a smile, but close. He offered his arm. Ready? Aria took a deep breath and placed her hand on his arm. The contact sent electricity through her, unexpected and unwanted. As I'll ever be. Good. He covered her hand with his own, the gesture possessive. Because once we walk into that gala, there's no going back. You'll be mine in the eyes of everyone who matters, and that makes you a target. I was a target the moment I signed your contract, Aria pointed out. True. He led her toward the door where the car waited. But now everyone will know it, including Santoro. The name sent ice through her veins. Will he be there? Of course. Lorenzo's voice was grim. This is his gala, his charity, his opportunity to show everyone that he's still powerful despite the territories he's lost. His grip on her hand tightened, and his first chance to see you, to see Elena's ghost wearing my ring. Aria looked down at her left hand, where a diamond the size of her thumbnail caught the light. She'd barely noticed it being slipped on by the stylist earlier. Now it felt like a shackle. Is that what this is about? She asked as they stepped into the cool evening air. Showing him that you've replaced her? That he didn't break you? Lorenzo handed her into the car with practiced ease, sliding in beside her. The door closed, sealing them in the intimate darkness of the back seat. Partly, he admitted, but it's also about protecting you. If Santoro sees you as Elena's replacement, he won't touch you, because he knows I'd burn the world down if he took you from me too. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they made Aria's heart race for reasons she didn't want to examine. "And would you?" she asked quietly. "Burn the world down for me?" Lorenzo turned to look at her, and in the dim light of passing street lamps, his eyes were darker than midnight. "You have no idea what I do for you, Aria Moretti, and for both our sakes, I hope you never have to find out." Chapter 3. Into the Lion's Den. The Grand View Hotel ballroom glittered like something from a fever dream. Crystal chandeliers refracting light into 1,000 rainbows. Marble floors polished to mirrors. Arrangements of white roses the size of small cars positioned throughout the space like sentinels. And everywhere, predators in evening wear. Aria felt them before she saw them, the weight of dozens of eyes turning as Lorenzo led her through the entrance. Conversations stuttered and died. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the string quartet seemed to falter for a beat. Then the whispers started, a wave of speculation and shock rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Breathe," Lorenzo murmured against her ear, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "They're just people." Liars. But Aria forced herself to smile, to lift her chin, to look like she belonged among these beautiful monsters. "They're sharks, and I'm bleeding in the water. Then I'm the bigger shark." His fingers pressed slightly against her spine. Reassurance or possession, she couldn't tell. And they know it. A waiter appeared with champagne. Lorenzo took 2 glasses, handed her one, then raised his own toward the room in a gesture that was pure theater. A toast, a challenge, a declaration. "Mine," the gesture said. "Try to take her and see what happens." Aria sipped the champagne and tried not to choke. It was good, probably absurdly expensive, but it tasted like fear in her mouth. "Lorenzo Vitale!" A woman's voice, smooth as honey over broken glass. "What a surprise to see you here." Isabella Morelli materialized from the crowd like a particularly elegant viper. She was even more striking in person than in Vivian's photographs. Draped in black silk that probably cost more than Aria's entire new wardrobe. Diamonds at her throat and wrists, catching light like captured stars.
"Isabella." Lorenzo's voice was cordial, but his body had gone rigid beside Aria. "Always a pleasure." "Is it?" Isabella's smile was all teeth. Her eyes moved to Aria with the precision of a jeweler examining a suspicious stone. "And who is this lovely creature?" "My wife." Lorenzo pulled Aria closer, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. "Aria Vitale." The name landed like a bomb. Isabella's carefully composed expression cracked for just a moment, revealing something that looked like genuine shock. "Wife?" Isabella recovered quickly, but the damage was done. "How marvelous! I hadn't heard you'd remarried. When was the ceremony?" "Recently." Lorenzo's tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate. "We wanted privacy." "Of course." Isabella turned her full attention to Aria, and it felt like being pinned under a microscope. "Aria, what a charming name. Italian?" "Yes." Aria forced herself to meet the woman's gaze without flinching. Vivian's lessons echoed in her head. Never show weakness. Never give them ammunition. "My parents were traditional." "How wonderful. And your family name? Before marriage, I mean." Aria felt Lorenzo tense. This was the question, the one that would reveal who she was, where she came from, what connections she brought to this marriage. Moretti, Aria said, lifting her chin. Aria Moretti. Isabella's eyes widened. Moretti, as in, "My father did business with various families," Aria interrupted smoothly, "before his death." Fascinating. Isabella's smile had returned, but it was different now, calculating. The Morettis were well connected before things became complicated. A polite way of saying her father had been a thief and a suicide. Aria's jaw tightened. "My wife's lineage is impeccable," said, his voice sharp enough to cut. "And her value to me is beyond question. I trust that's understood." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Isabella's smile didn't waver, but something cold flashed in her eyes. "Of course, I meant no disrespect." She touched Aria's arm lightly, the gesture false as fool's gold. "Welcome to the family, dear. I hope you'll survive it." Then she was gone, melting back into the crowd like a shadow at noon.
"Well handled," Lorenzo murmured once Isabella was out of earshot. "She was trying to rattle you." "She succeeded." Aria's hands were shaking. She set down her champagne glass before anyone could notice. What did she mean about surviving? "Nothing. Everything. Isabella deals in implications." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "Come, there are others you need to meet." The next hour was a gauntlet of introductions. Businessmen with cold eyes and colder smiles. Politicians who looked at her like she was a commodity to be bought. Socialites who sized up her dress, her jewelry, her worth in a single glance. Through it all, Lorenzo kept her close. His hand never left her back, her arm, her waist. To anyone watching, they were the picture of newlywed devotion. But Aria could feel the tension in him, coiled tight as a spring about to snap. He was waiting for something, or someone. "Dance with me," Lorenzo said suddenly, pulling her toward the center of the ballroom, where couples swayed to the orchestra's rendition of something classical and melancholy. "I don't know how," Aria started, but he was already positioning her hands, one on his shoulder, the other captured in his. "Follow my lead," he murmured, and then they were moving. Aria had never waltzed in her life, had never been this close to Lorenzo, close enough to smell his cologne, feel the heat of his body, see the silver flecks in his dark eyes. His hand at her waist was firm, guiding her through steps she didn't know, and somehow her body understood what her mind didn't. "He's here," Lorenzo said quietly, his eyes scanning the room over her shoulder. "Santoro. Don't look, just keep dancing." Aria's heart lurched. She forced herself to maintain her smile, to keep moving, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. Where? Balcony entrance. He's watching us. Lorenzo spun her, using the movement to position himself between her and wherever Santoro stood. "He looks like he's seen a ghost." "Because I look like Elena," Aria whispered. "Yes," Lorenzo's grip tightened, which means he knows exactly what this is, what you are to me. "And what am I to you?" The question escaped before she could stop it.
Lorenzo's eyes dropped to hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "Something he can never take from me again." Before she could process that, a voice cut through the music. "Lorenzo, how rude of you not to introduce your bride." Lorenzo stopped dancing. His entire body went rigid, but his face remained carefully neutral as he turned to face the speaker. Marco Santoro was shorter than Aria had expected from his photographs, stocky, with iron-gray hair and eyes like chips of flint. He wore his tuxedo like armor, and the smile on his face was the most terrifying thing Aria had ever seen, because it looked genuine, warm even, like a grandfather greeting a beloved grandchild. "Marco," Lorenzo said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I wasn't aware you required an introduction. My marriage was in the papers." A small notice, easily missed. Santoro's eyes moved to Aria, and she felt them like a physical touch, invasive, assessing, wrong. "Though I see now why you kept it quiet. Your bride is remarkable." The pause before remarkable was deliberate, loaded with meaning she didn't want to understand. "My wife's name is Aria," Lorenzo said, and there was warning in every syllable. "And she's not available for conversation." "How possessive," Santoro's smile widened. "But surely she can speak for herself. Tell me, Aria, may I call you Aria? How did you meet our Lorenzo?" Aria knew this was a test, knew that everything she said would be analyzed, dissected, used against them. Vivian's lessons flooded back. "Through business connections," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "He was persistent. I was charmed. Love follows its own timeline." Love. Santoro tasted the word like wine. How unexpected. I wasn't aware Lorenzo still believed in such things. He paused, making it theatrical. "Well, after everything." Lorenzo's hand on her waist had become painful. "We're done here." "Of course." Santoro stepped back, spreading his hands in a gesture of peace that was anything but. "I just wanted to extend my congratulations and my condolences." The word hung in the air like poison gas. "Condolences?" Aria heard herself ask.
"Aria," Lorenzo started, but Santoro was already speaking. "For the burden you've taken on, my dear. Being Lorenzo's wife is, well, it's dangerous work. His last fiancée discovered that, though perhaps you're aware of her fate." His eyes glittered with malice. "You remind me of her, actually. Same eyes, same delicate bone structure. Almost like Lorenzo has a type." "That's enough." Lorenzo's voice was so cold it burned. "Touch her, threaten her, even think about her, and I will end you, Marco. Truce or no truce, I will erase every trace of your bloodline from this earth." The ballroom had gone quiet. People were staring, the tension between the two men crackling like electricity before a storm. Santoro's smile never wavered. "Such passion. I remember when you spoke that way about Elena, right before you let her die." He turned to Aria, his expression almost pitying. "Be careful, child. Lorenzo Vitale's protection is a death sentence." Then he walked away, leaving them standing in the middle of the dance floor with hundreds of eyes watching. Lorenzo moved like a man possessed. He grabbed Aria's hand and pulled her through the crowd, ignoring attempts at conversation, dodging well-wishers and curious onlookers. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the city, and only then did he release her, stalking to the railing like a caged animal. "I shouldn't have brought you here," he said, his voice raw. "I knew he'd do this, knew he'd try to hurt you to get to me. I was arrogant, stupid." Aria moved to stand beside him, grateful for the cool night air after the suffocating ballroom. "He's trying to rattle you, make you doubt yourself." "It's working." Lorenzo gripped the railing hard enough that his knuckles went white. Every word he said was true. "I failed Elena. I chose pride over her life, and now I've painted a target on your back by—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "By what?" Aria asked softly. "By marrying me? That was always the plan, Lorenzo. I knew the risks when I signed your contract." "You didn't know anything." He turned to face her, and the anguish in his eyes made her chest ache. You didn't know that Santoro would see you and immediately understand what you are, what you could be. And what am I? She moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. You said it yourself, something he can't take from you. But that's not the whole truth, is it?
Lorenzo looked away, out over the glittering city. When I first saw you, I thought I was hallucinating. That grief had finally broken me. You looked so much like Elena that it physically hurt to see you.
I know, you've said.
But then you spoke. His hands released the railing, hanging loose at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them. And your voice was different. Your mannerisms, the way you held yourself, proud despite everything you'd been through. You weren't Elena. You were something else, entirely.
Aria's heart hammered against her ribs. Lorenzo.
I told myself it was strategy, that marrying you would send a message, give me leverage, protect you from other predators. He laughed, the sound bitter. I told myself a lot of things. But tonight, watching Santoro look at you, knowing what he was thinking, his hands clenched into fists, I wanted to kill him. Not for what he did to Elena, for what he might do to you.
I don't understand, Aria whispered, even though she was beginning to, even though the truth was crystallizing between them like ice.
Lorenzo closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He stopped just short of touching her, his hands hovering near her face like he was afraid she'd shatter. This was supposed to be business, he said, his voice barely audible. A transaction. 1 year and you'd be free. But somewhere between that alley and tonight, between your defiance and your compassion, between every moment you've made me feel something other than grief, he stopped, searching her face. You stopped being Elena's ghost and became someone I can't afford to lose.
The words should have terrified her, should have sent her running back to the ballroom, back to the safety of pretense and distance. Instead, Aria found herself leaning into the space between them.
Then don't, she heard herself say. Don't lose me.
Something broke in Lorenzo's carefully maintained control. His hands finally made contact, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, his eyes searching hers for, what? Permission? Understanding?
Forgiveness, maybe, for what was about to happen.
Aria, he whispered, her name a prayer and a warning. If I kiss you, everything changes. The contract, the arrangement, all of it becomes real. Are you...
She didn't let him finish. Didn't let herself think about consequences or complications or the 1,000 reasons this was a terrible idea. She rose onto her toes and closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The world tilted. Lorenzo made a sound low in his throat, surprise or surrender she couldn't tell, and then his arms were around her, pulling her against him with a desperation that stole her breath. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined, not gentle, not careful, but hungry and urgent and tinged with something that felt like drowning. One of his hands tangled in her carefully styled hair, sending pins scattering. The other pressed against the small of her back, holding her so close she could feel his heartbeat thundering against her chest. Or maybe that was her own heart, impossible to tell where she ended and he began. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he said, but his hands didn't release her. "I'll ruin you, destroy you. Everyone I love ends up dead." "Then it's a good thing this is just a contract," Aria said, trying for lightness despite the way her entire body was trembling. "Just business. 1 year and I'm free, remember?" Lorenzo pulled back just enough to look at her, and the naked vulnerability in his eyes made her want to cry.
Do you really believe that? After this?
No, she didn't believe it at all, but admitting that felt like stepping off a cliff into empty air. Before she could answer, the balcony door opened. A man in a dark suit, one of Lorenzo's security team, appeared. "Sir, we have a situation." Lorenzo's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The vulnerable man disappeared, replaced by the cold-eyed crime boss Aria had first met in that alley. He stepped away from her, putting professional distance between them. "What kind of situation?" "The Morellis. They're asking questions about Mrs. Vitale's family connections. Isabella wants a private meeting." Lorenzo cursed under his breath. "Tell her I'm unavailable." "She's insisting, says it's about the Moretti territories." The name made Aria's stomach clench. Her father's territories. The connections Lorenzo had married her to access. Fine. Lorenzo adjusted his jacket, his face an impenetrable mask. "Take Mrs. Vitale to the car. I'll handle Isabella and meet you there." "Lorenzo," Aria started. "Go with Marcus," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I won't be long." But there was something in his voice, something in the rigid way he held himself, that made her heart sink. The walls were back up. The moment they'd shared, the kiss, the confession, the raw honesty, had been locked away behind steel and ice. Business. It was always going to come back to business. Marcus led her through service corridors to avoid the main ballroom. Aria was grateful. She couldn't face those people again, not with her hair disheveled and her lips probably swollen from Lorenzo's kiss. The car was waiting in the underground garage, engine running. Marcus opened the door for her, his expression professionally neutral, but Aria caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Pity? Sympathy? She slid into the back seat and waited, watching the elevator doors for Lorenzo to appear. Minutes ticked by. 5, 10, 15. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ask yourself why he really married you. Ask yourself what a man like Lorenzo Vitale would do for power. Ask yourself if your wife or weapon. A friend. Aria stared at the message, ice spreading through her chest. The words echoed Santoro's implications, Isabella's warnings, every doubt she'd tried to suppress since that night in the alley. Was she Lorenzo's wife? Or was she just another piece on his chessboard, moved around to advance his position, sacrificed when the game demanded it? The elevator doors finally opened. Lorenzo emerged, his expression grim, and crossed to the car without a word. He slid in beside her, maintaining careful distance. "What did Isabella want?" Aria asked as the car pulled out of the garage. "Information." Lorenzo stared out the window, his jaw tight. "About your father's old connections, the territories he controlled before he died." "And you gave it to her?" "Some of it. Enough to keep her satisfied. Not enough to be useful." He finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "This is what I do, Aria. I play games with people's lives and call it strategy. I trade information like currency. I use every advantage I have, including me," Aria finished, her voice hollow. "Including your wife, who happens to carry her dead father's name and connections." Lorenzo's silence was answer enough. Aria pulled out her phone and showed him the text message. "Someone sent me this, while you were with Isabella." Lorenzo's face went white as he read it. "Who sent this?" "It says, a friend, but we both know I don't have friends in your world." She took the phone back, her hands shaking. "So tell me, Lorenzo, am I your wife, or am I your weapon?" He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The hurt that flashed across his face was visceral, but she couldn't let it sway her. Not now. Not when everything felt like it was built on lies. "Both,"
Lorenzo said finally, his voice rough. God help me, Aria, you're both. I need you for what you represent, what you give me access to. But I also— He stopped, running his hands through his hair. What happened on that balcony wasn't strategy. It wasn't manipulation. It was real. How do I know that? The question came out as a whisper. How do I know any of this is real? You don't. Lorenzo's honesty was brutal. You can't. I'm a liar by trade, Aria. I've built an empire on deception. The only thing I can tell you is that I've never lied about wanting to protect you. And I've never lied— He stopped, jaw clenching— about the way you make me feel. The car pulled through the estate gates. Aria watched the familiar iron scroll past, feeling like she was returning to a beautiful prison. I need time, she said as the car stopped in front of the house, to think, to figure out what I believe. Lorenzo nodded, his expression carefully blank. Take all the time you need. But Aria— He caught her wrist gently as she moved to exit the car. Whatever you decide, know this. I will keep you safe, whether you trust me or not, whether you want me or not. That's not negotiable. She pulled free and escaped into the house, leaving him sitting alone in the dark car. That night, Aria lay in her too-big bed and touched her lips, remembering the kiss, remembering the way Lorenzo had held her like she was precious, like she was everything. But she also remembered the way he'd shut down the moment business called, the way he'd admitted to using her connections, the way he was both her protection and her greatest danger. Above her, she heard his footsteps, pacing, back and forth, back and forth. Both of them sleepless, both of them haunted. Both of them falling for someone they couldn't trust.
Chapter 4: Shadows and Secrets. The Cold War between them lasted 3 days. 3 days of Lorenzo leaving before dawn and returning after midnight. 3 days of meals taken in her room, delivered by Sophia with sympathetic eyes. 3 days of Aria wandering the estate like a ghost, avoiding the places Lorenzo might be, trying to forget the taste of his lips and the sound of his confession, trying to decide if anything about him was real. On the 4th morning, she woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Heavy cream paper, no return address, her name written in elegant script across the front. Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photograph showed a woman, dark hair, delicate features, eyes that could have been Aria's own. She stood in a garden wearing a white dress, laughing at whoever held the camera, happy, alive, unaware that death was coming for her. Elena. The note was brief. She trusted him too. Look where it got her. The 3rd floor holds the truth he won't tell you. East wing, last door. Go at night when he's not home. A friend. Aria stared at the photograph until her hand shook. The resemblance was uncanny. Not exact, but close enough to explain Lorenzo's reaction that first night. Close enough to understand Santoro's cruel comparisons. Close enough to make her wonder if Lorenzo saw her at all, or just Elena's ghost wearing her face. She should have shown the note to Lorenzo, should have told him someone was trying to manipulate her. But the words echoed in her mind. The 3rd floor holds the truth he won't tell you. What truth? What was Lorenzo hiding in those forbidden rooms? Aria spent the day trying to convince herself not to go, trying to trust Lorenzo's warnings about closed doors and undisturbed ghosts. But curiosity and doubt were powerful weapons, and whoever was sending these messages knew exactly which buttons to push. That evening, Lorenzo appeared for dinner, the first time she'd seen him in days. He looked terrible, exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, and a tension in his shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights and too much stress. "You look awful," Aria said before she could stop herself. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "Thank you. That's exactly what every man wants to hear from his wife." The word wife hung between them, loaded with all the complications of the past few days. "I'm sorry," Aria said quietly, "for avoiding you, for not talking about," she gestured vaguely, "everything." Lorenzo poured wine with careful precision. "You have nothing to apologize for. I put you in an impossible situation. Kissed you, confessed things I shouldn't have, then immediately used your family connections for political leverage. You have every right to doubt me." The brutal honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. "Did you mean it?" Aria asked. "What you said on the balcony?" Lorenzo's hand tightened around his wineglass. "Every word. But that doesn't make it fair to you. You're trapped here because of your father's debts, because I gave you no choice. Any feelings you might develop would be—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Stockholm Syndrome, essentially. Captive falling for captor. I won't use that against you." "So what? You're just going to ignore what happened? Pretend that kiss didn't exist?" "I'm going to give you space to figure out what you actually want, without pressure, without manipulation." He finally looked at her, and the resignation in his eyes made her chest ache. "You have 9 months left on your contract. Then you're free to leave, if you still want to." The implied question, "Will you want to?" hovered unspoken. Aria should have felt relieved. He was giving her exactly what she'd asked for: time, space, freedom from his intensity. Instead, she felt something dangerously close to disappointment. "I received something today," she said, pulling out the photograph. "This was slipped under my door." Lorenzo's face went white. He took the photo with trembling hands, staring at Elena's laughing face like it was a weapon aimed at his heart. "Where did you get this?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Someone's been sending me messages. First the text at the gala, now this." She didn't mention the note that came with it. "Not yet. They're trying to make me doubt you, question your motives." "And are they succeeding?" Lorenzo set the photo down like it burned him. "I don't know," Aria admitted. "I look at her and I see myself. I hear what people say, that I'm her replacement, that you chose me because I remind you of her. How do I compete with a ghost, Lorenzo? How do I know you see me at all?" He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against marble. For a moment, Aria thought he'd leave. Instead, he moved around the table and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his eyes intense. "Yes, you look like Elena. Yes, that resemblance is what first caught my attention. But Elena was gentle, quiet, raised in this world. She knew how to play the game because she'd been taught since birth." He squeezed her hands gently. You're fire and defiance. You challenge me, question me, refuse to be intimidated by any of this. You survived things Elena never had to face, and you did it alone. When I look at you, I don't see her. I see strength she never needed, courage she never had to develop, a woman who would have fought her way out of that kidnapping instead of waiting to be rescued. Aria's throat tightened. "You can't know that. I can, because I've watched you adapt to this world in weeks, because you stood up to Santoro and Isabella without flinching, because you're sitting here questioning me instead of just accepting what I tell you." His voice dropped. "Elena would have believed me without question, would have trusted me completely, and that's why she died." The confession landed like a physical blow. "What?" Lorenzo released her hands and stood, moving to the window.
The night she was taken, I told her I had to go to a business meeting. Told her to stay in the house where she'd be safe. She didn't question it, didn't ask why I was leaving her alone when there were threats. She just smiled and said she'd wait up for me. His voice cracked. If she'd questioned me, pushed back, demanded to come with me, or at least know the details, maybe she'd still be alive. That's not your fault, Aria said softly.
Isn't it? I should have protected her better. Should have anticipated the attack. He stopped, shaking his head. But I can't change the past. All I can do is make sure I don't make the same mistakes with you. Is that what I am? Your second chance at redemption? No. He turned to face her. You're the woman who makes me want to be better than the monster I've become, who makes me think about futures beyond revenge and territory, He stopped, looking away. Who terrifies me because losing you would destroy what's left of my soul. The words hung in the air, raw and honest and utterly vulnerable. Then trust me, Aria said. Stop hiding things from me. Stop trying to protect me from the truth. If you want me to believe in us, you have to let me in. Lorenzo's expression shuddered. Some truths are better left buried. Like whatever you're hiding on the 3rd floor? His entire body went rigid. Who told you about the 3rd floor? Does it matter? You have rooms up there devoted to Elena. Rooms you won't let anyone enter. What are you hiding, Lorenzo? What's so terrible that you can't tell me? I'm hiding nothing, he said, but his voice was too controlled, too careful. Those rooms contain Elena's things, her clothes, her books, her life. I haven't been able to clear them out. That's all. I don't believe you. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. Then don't. But stay out of those rooms, Aria. I'm asking you, no, I'm ordering you to respect that boundary. The shift from vulnerable confession to cold command was jarring. Aria stood, anger flaring. You can't do this. You can't tell me you want me to trust you and then refuse to be honest with me. It doesn't work that way. In my world, it works however I say it works. But there was desperation beneath the arrogance. Please, Aria, don't push this. Not now. Why not now? What changes later? Everything, he said quietly. Or nothing. I don't know yet. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and whatever he saw made his expression harden. I have to go. There's a situation at one of the warehouses. Of course there is, Aria said bitterly. Business always calls at the most convenient times. Lorenzo paused at the door. This conversation isn't over, but, Aria, promise me you'll stay out of the 3rd floor. She said nothing. Aria? I'll consider it. His expression suggested he knew exactly what that meant. Don't do this. Whatever game someone is playing with you, don't let them win. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with her doubts and the photograph of a dead woman who looked like her reflection. Aria waited until midnight, waited until the house fell silent except for the usual creaks and groans, waited until she was sure Lorenzo wouldn't be coming back anytime soon. Then she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway was darker than the ones below, with only emergency lighting casting long shadows. The air felt different here, heavier, charged with something Aria couldn't name. Grief, maybe? Or guilt? She found the east wing easily enough. The last door, just as the note had said, stood at the end of the corridor. Unlike the other doors, this one had a modern lock, electronic, requiring a code. But someone had left it unlocked. The light blinked green. A trap. Obviously a trap. Whoever was sending those messages had arranged this, wanted her to see whatever was behind that door. Aria hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. Lorenzo's voice echoed in her mind. Some doors are better left closed.
But she'd spent her entire life having decisions made for her, by her father, by his debts, by Lorenzo and his contract. For once, she wanted to make her own choice, even if it was the wrong one. She opened the door. The room beyond was smaller than she expected. Not a bedroom or sitting room, but something closer to an office. A desk dominated one wall, covered in papers and photographs. Filing cabinets lined another. A corkboard hung above the desk, covered in what looked like a conspiracy theorist's nightmare. Photographs, notes, strings connecting different pieces. An investigation. This was an investigation room.
Aria moved closer, her heart pounding. The photographs on the corkboard were all of Elena, some from before her death, happy and alive, others from after, police reports and crime scene documentation that made Aria's stomach turn. But there were other photographs too, recent ones, of people she didn't recognize, of locations, warehouses, shipping routes, and in the center of it all, a photograph of Marco Santoro with a single word written across it in red marker, liar. Aria studied the notes pinned beside it. Lorenzo's handwriting, she recognized it now. Dates, times, discrepancies in the official story, questions about witnesses who disappeared, evidence that didn't add up. Lorenzo was investigating Elena's death. 3 years later, he was still trying to find the truth, or trying to prove something. She moved to the desk, careful not to disturb anything. A leather journal lay open, Lorenzo's neat script filling the pages. She shouldn't read it. This was private, personal. She read it anyway. The Santoro story has holes. Marco claims his men took Elena on his orders, but the timeline doesn't match. The warehouse where they held her was under surveillance, my surveillance. No one entered or left during the window he claims. Either he's lying about when she was taken, or she was never there at all. Witness reports are inconsistent. 3 people claimed to see the kidnapping. All 3 are now dead. Convenient accidents. The police investigation was shut down within a week. Federal involvement disappeared. Someone powerful wanted this case closed. Elena's body showed signs of torture, but also evidence of medical care, professional care. Santoro's men are animals. They wouldn't have bothered keeping her alive longer than necessary. Someone else had her. Someone with resources and patience. Aria flipped ahead, her hands shaking. Theory. Elena wasn't kidnapped for ransom or revenge. She was taken because she knew something, discovered something. Her death wasn't about hurting me. It was about silencing her. But what did she know? What could justify this level of cover-up? And who had the power to make it all disappear? The next entry was dated 6 months ago.
I found her. Aria Moretti, working at Giuseppe's, barely surviving, drowning in her father's debts. The resemblance is uncanny, almost too perfect to be coincidence. Her father worked with Elena's family before his fall. He had access to information, connections. He might have known what Elena discovered. If I bring her into my world, into my home, whoever killed Elena will notice. They'll see the resemblance. They'll wonder if she knows something. And when they come for her, because they will come for her, I'll be ready. I'll use Aria Moretti as bait to catch a killer. And God forgive me, but I'll do whatever it takes to find the truth. Even if it means putting her in danger. Even if it means using her the way I failed to use Elena. The words blurred. Aria read them again, hoping she'd misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding the truth laid bare in Lorenzo's own hand. He'd known about her for 6 months, had planned this entire thing, the contract, the marriage, bringing her into his world.
Not to save her, not because he wanted her, but because she was useful, because she looked like Elena and had connections to the same circles, because she was bait. Aria's vision swam. She gripped the desk, trying to breathe, trying to process this betrayal. Everything, the protection, the gala, even the kiss, had been calculated. Manipulation dressed up as romance. A sound made her freeze, footsteps in the hallway. "I know you're in there, Aria." Lorenzo's voice, cold and controlled. "Step away from the desk." She didn't move, couldn't move. Her body had turned to stone, her mind unable to reconcile the man who'd confessed his feelings with the man who'd written those words. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, and the look on his face confirmed everything. Not surprise, not anger, just resignation. He'd known she would find this, had maybe even wanted her to. "How much did you read?" he asked quietly. "Enough." Aria's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. "You've been planning this for 6 months, watching me, waiting for the right moment to spring your trap." Yes. The simple affirmation was worse than any excuse would have been. "I'm bait," she said. "That's all I've ever been to you, bait to catch whoever killed Elena."
"That's how it started," Lorenzo admitted, moving into the room. But nothing! Aria backed away from him, from the desk, from the evidence of his betrayal. Everything was a lie. The protection, the marriage, the kiss, all of it calculated to make me trust you, to make me vulnerable. So when your killer comes for me, I won't see it coming. "That's not true," Lorenzo said. But his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Tell me, Lorenzo, when you kissed me at the gala, were you thinking about catching a killer, or were you thinking about me?" He said nothing, and his silence was answer enough. Aria laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "I asked you to trust me, to let me in, but you were never going to tell me this, were you? You were going to let me walk into danger thinking I was safe, thinking you cared." "I do care," Lorenzo said, finally showing emotion. "Aria, what started as a plan, it changed. You changed it. I never expected." "Stop." She held up her hand. "Just stop. I can't listen to more lies. I can't—" Her voice cracked. "I trusted you. Despite everything, despite all the warnings, I was starting to believe that maybe you saw me, that maybe I mattered." "You do matter," Lorenzo insisted, taking a step toward her. "More than you know, more than I should have let you." "Then why?" Aria's composure finally shattered. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and unwanted. "Why use me like this? Why not just tell me the truth from the beginning?" "Because you never would have agreed," Lorenzo said quietly. "Because the truth was ugly and selfish and made me look like exactly the monster I am. Because I was so consumed by the need for revenge that I didn't care who I hurt to get it." He moved closer, and Aria saw the anguish in his eyes. "But somewhere along the way, you stopped being a means to an end. You became—" He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "You became the reason I questioned everything. The reason I started wondering if revenge was worth the cost. The reason I—" "Don't." Aria couldn't bear to hear him say it. "Not now. Not like this. Don't tell me you love me. Not when everything between us has been built on lies." Lorenzo's face crumpled. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I am. That I regret using you? I do. That I wish I could go back and do everything differently? God, Aria, I'd give anything to go back to that alley and tell you the truth." "But you wouldn't," Aria said, the truth crystallizing. "You'd do exactly the same thing. Because catching Elena's killer matters more to you than anything else, including me." Lorenzo's silence condemned him. "I want out," Aria said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. "The contract. I want out." "You can't leave," Lorenzo said immediately. "It's not safe. Whoever killed Elena will come for me anyway, now that you've painted a target on my back. At least if I leave, I won't be trapped here with a man who sees me as bait." She moved toward the door, but Lorenzo blocked her path. "I'm not letting you go. Not like this. Not when you're in danger. You don't get to decide that," Aria said. "You don't get to control my life anymore. I'm done being your pawn, Lorenzo. I'm done being used." "Then what do you want?" His voice rose, finally showing real emotion. "You want me to let you walk out of here? Into Santoro's hands? Into Isabella's web? You think you're safer out there than you are here?" "I don't know," Aria admitted. "But at least out there I'll know where I stand. I'll know who my enemies are. Here, I don't even know if you're on my side." The words hit him like physical blows. Lorenzo stepped aside, his face a mask of pain. "You're right. You have every reason to doubt me, every reason to hate me. But, Aria," his voice broke, "I am on your side, even if you can't see it, even if I've given you no reason to believe it. Everything I've done, every lie I've told, it's all been to protect you. By using me as bait? By keeping you close enough that I can stop what happened to Elena from happening to you." Lorenzo's hands clenched into fists. "I know how it sounds. I know what I am. But I swear to you, Aria, I will not let anyone hurt you. Not Santoro, not Isabella, not whoever killed Elena. You are not her. You are not going to die because of my mistakes." Aria wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that somewhere beneath the lies and manipulation was a man who actually cared. But trust, once shattered, was almost impossible to rebuild. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think, time to figure out what I want. And you need to stay away from me. No more dinners, no more confessions, no more—" her voice caught. "No more pretending this is anything other than what it is." Lorenzo nodded slowly. "How much time?" "I don't know. As long as it takes." "And if someone makes a move before you decide? If the killer comes for you while you're still deciding whether to trust me? Then I guess we'll see if you meant any of what you said." Aria pushed past him, out into the hallway, away from that room and its terrible revelations. She made it halfway down the stairs before her legs gave out. She sank onto the steps, buried her face in her hands, and let herself cry. For the trust she'd given too easily. For the man who'd seemed too good to be true. For the ghost of a dead woman whose shadow was destroying everything. Above her, in that terrible room, Lorenzo stood alone among his secrets. In his hand, he held the journal entry Aria had read, the one that condemned him. But she hadn't read far enough, hadn't seen the entries from the past 2 weeks, the ones where his careful plan had started to unravel. "I'm losing control of this, of her, of myself. Every moment with Aria makes me question everything. The plan was simple. Use her, catch the killer, let her go. But I can't imagine letting her go now. Can't imagine this house without her. Can't imagine my life without her in it. I'm in love with her. God help me. I'm in love with the woman I'm using as bait. And when she finds out the truth, when she learns what I've done, she'll never forgive me. She shouldn't forgive me. I don't deserve her forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it anyway." Lorenzo closed the journal and locked it in the desk drawer. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. "Double the security," he said quietly. "Around the house, around her. I don't care what it costs. No one gets close to her. Not now, not ever." He hung up and looked at the corkboard, at Elena's smiling face, surrounded by evidence and questions. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the ghost. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I won't make the same mistake twice. Even if it means Aria hates me, even if it means losing her, I'll keep her alive." Outside the room, neither of them noticed the small red light blinking on the security camera. The camera that shouldn't have been recording. The camera that was sending footage to someone who was very interested in the Vitale family's secrets. Someone who had just confirmed that Aria Moretti was exactly the leverage they needed.
Chapter 5. When Ghosts Come Calling. The silence between them lasted 5 days. 5 days of avoiding each other in hallways too large to make it easy. 5 days of Aria eating alone while knowing Lorenzo was doing the same somewhere else in the vast house. 5 days of trying to convince herself she was better off knowing the truth, even if the truth had shattered something she hadn't realized she'd been building. Hope. She'd been building hope, and Lorenzo had demolished it with his careful plans and calculated deceptions. But the silence couldn't last forever, not in Lorenzo's world, where danger didn't wait for broken hearts to mend. On the 6th morning, Aria woke to chaos. Raised voices echoed through the house, running footsteps, the sound of cars arriving outside, doors slamming. She threw on clothes and emerged from her room to find the estate in controlled pandemonium. Security personnel rushed past her without explanation. Mrs. Chen appeared, her usually implacable expression tight with worry. "What's happening?" Aria demanded. "Mr. Vitale will explain," Mrs. Chen said, which was her way of saying she'd been ordered not to tell. "He's asked you to come to his office immediately. I'm not taking orders from him anymore." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Miss Moretti, this isn't a request. Something has happened. Something that affects your safety. Please." The word please from Mrs. Chen was so unusual that Aria found herself following without further argument. Lorenzo's office was controlled chaos. 3 computer screens displayed what looked like security footage. Marcus and 2 other men Aria didn't recognize stood around the desk, all speaking in rapid Italian. Lorenzo sat at the center of it all, his attention fixed on a laptop, his expression carved from stone. He looked up when she entered, and whatever he saw in her face made him dismiss everyone with a curt gesture. The room emptied in seconds, leaving them alone for the first time since the confrontation on the 3rd floor. "What's going on?" Aria asked, hating how her voice shook. Lorenzo turned the laptop toward her. The screen showed a news website, a headline in bold. "Vitale heir marries Moretti daughter in secret arrangement." Beneath it was a photograph of them at the gala, Lorenzo's hand at her waist, her looking up at him with an expression that made her stomach turn. She looked in love, completely, hopelessly in love. "This appeared an hour ago," Lorenzo said, his voice carefully controlled. "Every major news outlet, social media, it's everywhere." "So what? People know we're married. That's not exactly a secret." "Read the article." Aria scanned the text, her horror growing with each paragraph. The article didn't just report their marriage, it detailed the contract, her father's deaths, Lorenzo's arrangement to clear them in exchange for 1 year of marriage. It portrayed her as bought merchandise, Lorenzo as a calculating monster, and their entire relationship as a business transaction. Which, she supposed bitterly, was the truth. But then she reached the final paragraph, and ice flooded her veins. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Vitale's interest in Miss Moretti extends beyond her family connections.
The resemblance between Aria Moretti and Elena Russo, Lorenzo Vitale's murdered fiancée, is striking. Insiders speculate that Moretti serves as a replacement for the woman Vitale failed to protect 3 years ago. Or perhaps something more sinister, bait to draw out Elena's killer. "Oh God," Aria whispered. "It gets worse." Lorenzo pulled up another screen. More articles, more speculation, more photographs. Some showed Elena and Aria side by side. The resemblance was undeniable. Someone leaked details from my investigation, from the 3rd floor. Aria's mind raced. The camera! There was a camera in that room.
Hidden in the bookshelf. I found it this morning. Lorenzo's hands clenched. Someone has been watching us, recording us, and they just went public with everything. Who would do this? Santoro? Isabella? Maybe. Probably. Does it matter? He stood, moving to the window with the restless energy of a caged predator. The damage is done. Now everyone knows you're connected to me, connected to Elena's death. And whoever killed her knows I'm still investigating, knows I'm using you as... He stopped.
As bait, Aria finished. They know I'm bait.
Lorenzo turned to face her. Which makes you a target, a threat. If Elena's killer thinks you might lead me to them, or that you know something...
They'll come for me. The truth settled over her like a shroud, just like they came for Elena.
Not if I protect you. Lorenzo crossed to her in 3 strides. I'm moving you to a safe house, somewhere off the grid. Triple security, new identity, everything you need. You'll be safe until I can...
Until you can what? Catch a killer you've been hunting for 3 years? How long am I supposed to hide, Lorenzo? Weeks? Months? The rest of my life?
However long it takes, he said stubbornly.
No. Aria surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. You painted this target on my back. Fine. But I'm going to have a say in what happens next.
Aria!
You wanted to use me as bait? Then let's use me as bait. She moved to the desk, looking at the screens, the evidence, the 3 years of obsessive investigation. You've been doing this alone. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you need someone who can see what you're missing.
Lorenzo stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Absolutely not. I'm not putting you in more danger than you're already in.
I'm already in maximum danger. The article made sure of that. Aria gestured at the screens. At least if we're working together, I'll know what's coming. I'll be prepared. And maybe, she stopped, surprised by the thought forming, maybe I can help. My father knew these people, worked with them. I grew up hearing stories, learning names. I might see connections you've missed.
You're suggesting we partner up? After everything I've done? After I lied to you, used you, put you in danger? I'm suggesting I take control of my own fate, Aria corrected. You made me a player in this game whether I wanted to be or not. Fine. But I play on my own terms. Not hiding in some safe house. Not running. Not waiting to be a victim. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Surprise, maybe? Or respect. You're serious. Completely. Show me everything. The investigation, the evidence, the suspects. Let me help you figure out what really happened to Elena. And when her killer comes for me, because they will come, we'll be ready. Lorenzo ran his hands through his hair, warring with himself. This is insane. You're asking me to deliberately put you in the line of fire. I'm already in the line of fire. At least this way, I'm not blindfolded too. She moved closer to him, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear he was trying to hide. You said you wanted to protect me. Then protect me by treating me like a partner, not a victim. Trust me enough to let me fight beside you. Trust, Lorenzo said bitterly.
You're asking me to trust you when you have every reason not to trust me. I'm asking you to give me a choice, Aria corrected. For once, let me choose. Not because of a contract, not because I have no other option, but because I'm choosing to stand and fight. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they'd said and everything they hadn't. Finally, Lorenzo nodded slowly. All right, but we do this my way. Full security. You don't go anywhere without guards. You don't make a move without telling me. And if things go wrong? If things go wrong, at least I went down fighting. Aria held out her hand. Partners? Lorenzo looked at her offered hand for a long moment. Then he took it, his grip warm and firm, and somehow both comforting and terrifying. Partners, he agreed. God help us both. The next hours were a crash course in Lorenzo's obsession. He spread everything out before her. Files, photographs, timelines, witness statements. 3 years of investigation condensed into a paper trail of grief and determination. Elena disappeared on October 15th, 3 weeks before our wedding, Lorenzo began, his voice taking on the flat tone of someone who told this story too many times. She'd been at the house all day. I left at 6 for a meeting with the Morellis, a territory negotiation that couldn't be postponed. She kissed me goodbye, said she'd read and wait up for me. He pulled up security footage on one of the screens. Aria watched a beautiful woman, Elena, moving through rooms she now recognized. The library, the gardens, always alone, always seemingly safe. The cameras went dark at 8:30, Lorenzo continued. All of them, simultaneously. Sophisticated hack, probably inside help. By the time they came back online at 9, she was gone. No signs of struggle, no broken windows or forced entry. It was like she vanished. Inside help, Aria said. Someone on your staff? I investigated everyone, had them all questioned, backgrounds checked. Nothing. Either they're very good liars, or it wasn't staff. Someone she knew, someone she trusted enough to go with willingly. Lorenzo's expression darkened. That's my theory. But it doesn't fit the Santoro narrative. Marco claimed his men grabbed her from the gardens, that she fought, that they had to drug her to get her in the van. But there was no evidence of that, Aria said. No drugs in her system? The autopsy was inconclusive. Too much time had passed. But there were other inconsistencies. He pulled up more documents. The ransom demand came 2 days after she disappeared. Standard demand. Territories, money, power. But the wording was wrong. Wrong how? Too polite, too educated. The Santoros are brutal but not sophisticated. This read like someone with a degree wrote it, not Marco's usual thugs. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. I called his bluff, refused to negotiate, told him to send me proof of life. And he sent her body instead. 3 days later, dumped at the gates like garbage. Lorenzo's voice cracked. She'd been tortured, methodically, professionally. Not the work of angry kidnappers, but someone with medical knowledge. Someone who knew how to hurt without killing, at least until they decided to kill. Aria's stomach turned at the clinical description. What did the autopsy say? Death by asphyxiation, manual strangulation. But, he pulled up the coroner's report, there were also signs of surgical intervention. Someone had treated her injuries, kept her alive longer than the torture should have allowed. They wanted information, Aria realized, not ransom. They were interrogating her. Yes. Lorenzo looked at her with something like approval. That's what I've been trying to prove for 3 years. Elena wasn't killed for revenge or money. She was killed because she knew something. Something worth elaborate kidnapping, professional torture, and a massive cover-up. But what? What could Elena have known that was worth all this? That's what I can't figure out. Lorenzo gestured to the corkboard, frustration evident. Elena wasn't involved in business.
She was sheltered, protected. Her family kept her away from anything illegal. She was supposed to be the perfect innocent bride. Maybe that's the problem, Aria said slowly. You're thinking about what she could have known. But what if it's about what she saw or heard? Something she stumbled onto accidentally. Lorenzo went still. Go on. My father used to say the most dangerous witnesses are the ones who don't know they're witnesses. The person who overhears a conversation, sees something they shouldn't, but doesn't realize it's important until later. Aria moved to the corkboard, studying the timeline. What was Elena doing in the weeks before she disappeared? Where did she go? Who did she see? Nowhere unusual. Wedding planning mostly. Dress fittings, caterer meetings, venue inspections. Lorenzo pulled up a calendar. She had lunch with Isabella Morelli twice, attended a charity gala, visited her parents. Nothing suspicious. Wait, Aria pointed at the calendar. She had lunch with Isabella? Why? Isabella was helping with the wedding, acting as a mentor of sorts. Elena was young, inexperienced with society events. Isabella offered guidance. The same Isabella who wanted you to marry her daughter? Who took your refusal as a public insult? Aria's mind raced. Lorenzo, what if Isabella wasn't helping Elena? What if she was using her? For what purpose? Information, access. Elena was your fiancée. She lived in your house, heard your conversations, saw your private life. What if Isabella was pumping her for intelligence? And what if Elena overheard something during one of their meetings? Something Isabella couldn't afford to have known. Lorenzo's expression shifted from skepticism to grim consideration. Isabella has always been ambitious, ruthless. But kidnapping and torture? That's not her style. She's subtle, sophisticated. Unless she was working with someone less subtle, Aria said, like Santoro. Think about it. He takes credit for the kidnapping, starts a war with you, benefits from the chaos. But maybe he was just the muscle. Maybe someone else was pulling the strings. Lorenzo was already pulling up files. Isabella and Santoro have had dealings in the past. Territory trades, business arrangements. If they were working together... He stopped, reading something on the screen. Mother of God. What? Financial records I got through less than legal means. 2 weeks before Elena was taken, Isabella received a transfer of $5 million from a shell corporation registered to... He looked up, his face pale. To Marco Santoro. Aria's heart pounded. Payment for services rendered. Or payment in advance. Lorenzo's hands clenched. For services about to be rendered. Like orchestrating a kidnapping and murder. Can we prove it? Not yet. But this is the first real lead I've had in 3 years. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. How did you see this? I've looked at these files 100 times. Fresh eyes, Aria said. And I know Isabella. Not personally, but my father did business with her. He always said she was the most dangerous person in the room because she never looked dangerous. She'd smile and serve you tea while planning your destruction. Lorenzo moved toward her, his expression transformed by something that looked like hope. You did in 2 hours what I couldn't do in 3 years. You connected dots I didn't even see were there. We're not done yet, Aria cautioned. This is just a theory. We need proof, evidence that will hold up. Then we get it. Lorenzo's voice was steel. Together. You were right. I've been doing this alone for too long. I was so focused on Santoro that I missed everyone else. So what's our next move? Before Lorenzo could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Isabella. Aria's pulse quickened. Answer it. See what she wants. Lorenzo put the call on speaker. Isabella? To what do I owe the pleasure? Lorenzo, I saw the news this morning. How terribly unfortunate.
Isabella's voice was silk over knives. All that private information made public. I can't imagine how violated you must feel. I'll survive. Is there a point to this call? Of course. I wanted to extend an invitation. For you and your lovely bride, I'm hosting a small gathering tomorrow evening. Very exclusive. Just a few families. I thought it might be good for Aria to meet some people in a more intimate setting. Lorenzo's eyes met Aria's. She nodded slightly. If they were right about Isabella, this could be their chance to confirm it. We'd be delighted, Lorenzo said smoothly. Wonderful. 8 o'clock. And Lorenzo, Isabella's voice dropped. Do bring security. After this morning's news, I'm sure you're concerned about Aria's safety. We wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen. Not like what happened to poor Elena. The line went dead. That was a threat, Aria said quietly. Yes. Lorenzo's face was grim. She's showing her hand. Either she's confident we can't touch her, or she's setting a trap. Or both. Aria moved to stand beside him, looking at the evidence spread across his desk. But we have to go. If she is involved in Elena's death, this might be our only chance to get proof. It's too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous, Aria countered. But Danger and I are old friends. I've been surviving dangerous situations since I was a kid. I can handle this. Lorenzo looked at her for a long moment. You're not the woman I met in that alley. No, I'm not. Aria straightened her shoulders. That woman was desperate and scared. This woman? This woman is angry. And I'm going to help you find out what happened to Elena. Not because I forgive you, not because I trust you, but because I deserve the truth just as much as you do. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Admiration mixed with concern. Aria, don't. She held up her hand. Don't tell me to be careful. Don't tell me you'll protect me. Just treat me like the partner I agreed to be. Give me the tools I need, the information I need, and trust that I can handle myself. I do trust you, Lorenzo said quietly. More than I've trusted anyone in years. That's what terrifies me. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. For a moment, Aria felt the pull again, the attraction, the connection, the dangerous feeling that maybe, despite everything, something real existed between them. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your partnership, but partnerships built on lies rarely survive. Ask Lorenzo what else he hasn't told you. Ask him about the other woman who looks like you, the one who's still alive. Aria's blood turned to ice. Lorenzo, what other woman? His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after we just agreed to be partners. She showed him the text. Who is she? Lorenzo read the message, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. Elena's sister, Sophia. She's been in witness protection for 3 years, hidden away where no one can find her, where no one can use her the way they used Elena. And she looks like me, Aria said, pieces falling into place. Like Elena. That's why you chose me. Not just because of my father's connections, but because I'm the same type. No. Lorenzo grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Sophia is dark-haired and similar in build, but she's nothing like you. She's timid, broken by what happened to her sister. I put her in protection to keep her safe. That's all. Then why didn't you tell me about her? Because she's irrelevant to this. Because mentioning her would have raised questions I wasn't ready to answer. Because... He stopped, jaw clenching. Because I'm an idiot who keeps making the same mistakes. Aria pulled away from him. "How many other secrets are you keeping? How many other things haven't you told me?" "None, I swear, Aria. There's nothing else." "How can I believe you? Every time I think I know the truth, something new surfaces." "Because I'm telling you now. Because I'm showing you everything. Because—" Lorenzo's voice broke. "Because I can't lose you too, Aria. I can't. And I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. Whatever it takes." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus entered, his expression grave. "Sir, we've identified who leaked the information to the press. You need to see this."
He handed Lorenzo a tablet. Whatever Lorenzo saw on the screen made him go perfectly still. "What is it?" Aria asked. Lorenzo showed her the screen. Security footage from inside the house. Someone moving through the halls at night, entering the third-floor investigation room. The figure turned toward the camera, and Aria's blood froze. It was Mrs. Chen. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. Mrs. Chen sat in Lorenzo's office with the composure of someone who'd been expecting this moment for a long time. No tears, no denials, no desperate explanations. Just quiet dignity and eyes that held more sadness than Aria had ever seen in another human being. "How long?" Lorenzo's voice was ice. "How long have you been feeding information to Isabella?" 3 years, Mrs. Chen said quietly, "since Elena died." The admission landed like a physical blow. Aria saw Lorenzo's hands clench, saw the muscle in his jaw jump, but when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. "Why?" "Because she has my daughter." Mrs. Chen's voice finally cracked. "Isabella Morelli has had my daughter for 3 years. Every week I send her information. Every week I get a photograph proving May is still alive. Those are the terms." Aria's anger faltered. "Your daughter?" "Lives in San Francisco. At least that's what everyone believes. That's what I told you, Mr. Vitale, when you hired me." Mrs. Chen looked at Lorenzo with hollow eyes. "But Isabella took her the day after Elena's funeral. Said if I wanted to see May alive again, I'd give her everything. Every conversation, every document, every secret in this house." "And you did?" Lorenzo said flatly. "I did." No apology in her voice. "I would do it again. She's my daughter, my only child. What would you do, Mr. Vitale, if someone took the person you love most?" The question hung in the air. Lorenzo's eyes flickered to Aria before looking away. "Did you know?" Aria asked. "About Elena? About what Isabella was planning?" "No." Mrs. Chen shook her head. "I only found out after. Isabella told me herself, like she was bragging. Said Elena discovered something she shouldn't have. Something about illegal arms deals through Morelli ports. Elena was going to tell you, Mr. Vitale, going to ruin years of Isabella's careful planning. So Isabella made sure she couldn't tell anyone." "And you did?" Lorenzo said flatly. "I did." No apology in her voice. "I would do it again. She's my daughter, my only child. What would you do, Mr. Vitale, if someone took the person you love most?" The question hung in the air. Lorenzo's eyes flickered to Aria before looking away. "Did you know?" Aria asked. "About Elena? About what Isabella was planning?" "No." Mrs. Chen shook her head. "I only found out after. Isabella told me herself, like she was bragging. Said Elena discovered something she shouldn't have. Something about illegal arms deals through Morelli ports. Elena was going to tell you, Mr. Vitale, going to ruin years of Isabella's careful planning. So Isabella made sure she couldn't tell anyone." Lorenzo stood abruptly, turning to face the window. His shoulders shook with barely controlled rage. Arms deals. Elena died over arms deals. International weapons trafficking, Mrs. Chen continued. Using legitimate shipping routes to move illegal weapons. Elena saw shipping manifests during one of her visits to Isabella. Took photographs because she thought the numbers looked wrong. She didn't even know what she was looking at, but Isabella couldn't risk it getting out. And Santoro? Aria asked. Provided the muscle, the torture. Isabella wanted to know if Elena had told anyone, if she'd made copies of those photographs. Marco's men got the answers Isabella needed. Then they killed her and made it look like a failed ransom. Lorenzo turned back, his face a mask of cold fury. And you knew all this. For 3 years, you knew Isabella murdered Elena, and you said nothing. I said nothing because I want my daughter to live. Mrs. Chen stood, meeting Lorenzo's gaze without flinching. You can hate me. You can kill me. But I will not apologize for choosing my child's life over your vengeance. The silence was suffocating. Finally, Lorenzo spoke, his voice eerily calm. Where is your daughter being held? Mrs. Chen blinked, surprise breaking through her composure. I don't know the exact location. Somewhere in the city. They move her regularly. But you have a contact method, a way to communicate, a phone number. They send me photos every week. Lorenzo pulled out his own phone. Call Marcus in here. Mr. Vitale, Mrs. Chen started. I'm going to find your daughter, Lorenzo said quietly. I'm going to get her back, and then you're going to help me destroy Isabella Morelli. 2 hours later, Aria stood in her room while a team of stylists prepared her for Isabella's gathering. The dress was stunning. Deep burgundy silk that seemed to shift between red and black depending on the light. Elegant, expensive, the kind of dress that whispered money and power. The kind of dress you wore to war. You look beautiful, Mrs. Vitale, Sophia said, adjusting the dress's neckline. Mr. Vitale won't be able to take his eyes off you. Aria caught her reflection in the mirror. Beautiful was one word for it. Dangerous was another. She looked like someone who belonged in Lorenzo's world, now polished, sophisticated, deadly. She barely recognized herself. A knock at the door made the stylists scatter. Lorenzo entered, and the look on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. Not the careful control she'd grown used to, not the cold mask. Pure, undisguised desire that he didn't quite manage to hide before the walls came back up. We need to talk, he said, his voice rougher than usual. About tonight. The stylists took the hint and left. Alone now, Aria turned to face Lorenzo fully. He'd changed into a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars, and she hated how good he looked. Hated that despite everything, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, she still felt pulled toward him like gravity. I'm listening, she said. Lorenzo moved to her dresser, pulling a small device from his pocket. This is a wire, state of the art. I need you to wear it. You want me to record Isabella? I want evidence. Mrs. Chen's testimony helps, but it's still hearsay. We need Isabella on record admitting what she did, connecting her to Elena's death. He held up the tiny device. This transmits directly to me. I'll be listening the entire time. If anything goes wrong, you'll come get me. I know. Aria took the device, studying it. Where does it go? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. It clips to your... He stopped. It needs to be close to your chest for the best audio. Then help me put it on. The words came out more challenging than she'd intended. Lorenzo looked at her, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. Aria, We're partners, right? This is part of the job. She turned her back to him, sweeping her hair over one shoulder. The dress has a zipper. She heard him take a breath. Then his fingers touched the zipper, and electricity shot through her. He lowered it slowly, exposing her back inch by inch. The air between them grew thick, charged with everything they'd been avoiding.
"There's a clip," he said, his voice strained. "Inside the bodice. I need to—" His fingers brushed her skin, and she shivered. "Sorry. Don't be." Aria closed her eyes, feeling his hands work the device into place. His touch was careful, professional, but she could feel the tension in him, could feel how much control it was taking not to let his hands linger. "There," he said finally, but he didn't step back, didn't raise the zipper, just stood there, his hands resting on her bare shoulders, his breath warm against her neck. "Lorenzo." His name was barely a whisper. "I know." His thumbs traced small circles on her skin. "I know I don't have the right. I know you don't trust me. I know I've given you every reason to hate me. But Aria," his voice dropped to something raw and desperate, "when I saw you in this dress, all I could think about was how much I—" He stopped himself, but Aria turned to face him, close enough that she could see the war in his eyes. Want versus control, need versus honor. "Want to what?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. Lorenzo's hands moved to frame her face, his touch achingly gentle. "Want to forget about Isabella, about the gathering, about everything except the fact that you're the most incredible woman I've ever met. And I'm terrified I'm going to lose you before I've even had the chance to—" He stopped, shaking his head. "But I can't. Not when you're about to walk into danger. Not when I need to focus on keeping you safe." "Then keep me safe," Aria whispered. "But Lorenzo, when this is over, when we've stopped Isabella and found out the truth, we're going to finish this conversation." Something like hope flickered across his face. "Promise?" "Promise." She stepped back, creating distance before she did something stupid like kiss him. "Now zip me up before I change my mind about tonight." Lorenzo's hands were shaking slightly as he raised the zipper. When he finished, he pressed a kiss to her shoulder so light she might have imagined it. "Come back to me," he whispered. "Whatever happens tonight, come back to me." Isabella's home was palatial even by the standards of Lorenzo's world. A sprawling estate that made the Vitale house look modest, complete with gardens that probably required a full-time staff of 20. The gathering was intimate, as promised. Perhaps 30 people scattered through a ballroom that could have held 300. All of them dangerous. All of them watching Aria with varying degrees of curiosity and calculation.
Isabella greeted them at the entrance, resplendent in emerald silk. "Lorenzo, Aria, how wonderful you could make it." Her smile was poison wrapped in honey. "Come, let me introduce you to some friends." The next hour was a masterclass in social warfare. Isabella paraded them through the room, making introductions that felt more like battlefield positioning. Each conversation was a test, each question a probe for weakness. Aria played her part perfectly, smiled when expected, deflected invasive questions, presented the image of a woman comfortable in this world, even as her heart hammered against the wire hidden in her dress. Lorenzo never left her side. His hand stayed at her back, his attention split between the conversations and constant threat assessment. Through the wire, Aria could occasionally hear his voice in her ear, quiet reassurances that only she could hear. "You're doing great. Stay alert. I'm here." Then Isabella touched her arm. "Aria, dear, could I steal you away for a moment? I'd love to show you my garden. It's quite spectacular at night."
Aria felt Lorenzo tense beside her. This was it, the opportunity they'd been waiting for, a private conversation with Isabella. "Of course," Aria said, ignoring Lorenzo's warning grip on her arm. "I'd love to see it." "Wonderful." Isabella's smile widened. "Lorenzo, you don't mind if I borrow your wife for a few minutes? I promise to return her in one piece." The implied threat was unmistakable. Lorenzo's face remained impassive, but Aria could see the calculation in his eyes. "Of course," he said smoothly, "though I'll need her back soon. We have plans tonight." His eyes met Aria's, and she read the message there clearly. "Be careful. I'm listening. Don't take unnecessary risks." She gave him a slight nod and let Isabella lead her away. The garden was indeed spectacular. Fairy lights strung through trees, a fountain at the center, flowers that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. It was also conveniently isolated from the main house, the sounds of the party fading to a distant murmur. "You must think me very cruel," Isabella said, leading Aria down a stone path, "inviting you here after this morning's news." "I think you're strategic," Aria replied carefully. "Everything you do seems to have a purpose."
"Clever girl." Isabella's smile was approving. "You're sharper than Elena was. She was sweet, but naive, trusting. It made her vulnerable." Aria's pulse quickened. "You knew Elena well?" "Very well. I mentored her in a way. Helped her prepare for life as Lorenzo's wife. Such a tragedy would happen to her." Isabella stopped beside the fountain, studying Aria in the moonlight. "You look remarkably like her, you know, almost identical. It must be difficult for Lorenzo, loving a ghost." "He doesn't love a ghost," Aria said. "He loves the truth. He wants to know what really happened to her." "Does he?" Isabella's expression shifted, becoming harder. "And what truth do you think he'll find? That poor Elena was in the wrong place at the wrong time? That she saw something she shouldn't have?" Aria forced herself to stay calm. "I don't know what she saw, but Lorenzo will find out. He's very thorough." "Yes, I'm aware." Isabella moved closer, her voice dropping. 3 years he's been investigating. 3 years of obsession. It's almost admirable, really. But Aria... She reached out, touching Aria's cheek with cold fingers. "Some truths are better left buried. Some ghosts should stay dead." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice from someone who's survived in this world far longer than you." Isabella's hand dropped. "Elena trusted me, came to me with questions, concerns. She was going to tell Lorenzo about some shipping manifests she'd seen, documents that would have caused me considerable trouble." Aria's heart pounded. Isabella was confessing, actually confessing. "So you had her killed?" Aria said, keeping her voice steady. "I had her silenced," Isabella corrected. "There's a difference. If she'd simply forgotten what she saw, kept her mouth shut, she'd still be alive. But Elena was principled, honest. She was going to expose my entire operation." Isabella's expression hardened. "I couldn't allow that." "So you tortured her, used Santoro to do your dirty work." "Marco was well compensated for his services, and his methods, while crude, were effective. Elena told us everything, who she'd talked to, what she'd photographed, where she'd hidden the evidence. Then we ensured she couldn't tell anyone else." Aria felt sick. "And Lorenzo thinks it was about him, about the territories." "Of course he does. That's the beauty of it. His pride blinded him to the real motive.
He spent 3 years looking in the wrong direction entirely. Isabella smiled, though apparently not anymore. You've been quite helpful in refocusing his attention. Ice flooded Aria's veins. What? Did you really think I didn't know about your little investigation? About Mrs. Chen's daughter? About the wire you're wearing right now? Isabella's expression turned pitying. Dear child, I've been 3 steps ahead of you from the beginning. Aria instinctively stepped back, but Isabella caught her arm. Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you, not tonight anyway. Isabella's grip tightened. But I am going to give you a message for Lorenzo. Tell him that if he continues this investigation, I'll do to you exactly what I did to Elena, and this time I won't make it quick. He won't stop, Aria said, finding her voice. Not for me, not for anyone. You've underestimated him. Have I? Isabella released her arm. Then you'll both die, because I've built an empire on those shipping routes. I've made billions moving weapons to people who need them, and I will not let some lovesick fool and his replacement girlfriend destroy that. Movement at the garden entrance made them both turn. Lorenzo stood there, Marcus and 4 other armed men flanking him. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned with barely controlled fury. Isabella Morelli, he said, his voice deadly calm. You're under arrest. Isabella laughed. Arrest? By whose authority? A new figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a federal agent's jacket. Mine. FBI Special Agent Morrison. We've been building a case against you for years, Mrs. Morelli. Tonight's confession just sealed it. Isabella's expression finally cracked. She looked from the agent to Lorenzo to Aria, understanding dawning in her eyes. You set me up, she said softly. Yes. Lorenzo moved to Aria's side, pulling her against him protectively. I set you up, just like you set up Elena. Justice has a funny way of coming around, doesn't it? As federal agents swarmed the garden, as Isabella was read her rights, Aria felt the adrenaline finally crash. Her legs went weak, and Lorenzo caught her. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. You were incredible, so brave, so perfect.
She knew, Aria whispered, about the wire, about everything. I know, I heard. Lorenzo pulled back just enough to look at her, but she didn't know about Agent Morrison, didn't know I'd been working with the FBI for months. She was so confident in her own intelligence that she walked right into the trap. It's over, Aria said, the truth settling over her. It's really over. Not quite. Lorenzo brushed a strand of hair from her face. We still have to find Mrs. Chen's daughter. Still have to deal with Santoro. Still have to... He stopped, his expression softening. Still have to figure out what happens next. Between us. Aria looked up at him. This man who'd lied to her and used her, and somehow still managed to make her feel more alive than she'd ever felt. Take me home, she said quietly, and then we'll talk. The ride home was silent. Lorenzo kept his arm around her, and Aria let herself lean into him, exhausted from the adrenaline crash. Back at the estate, he walked her to her room. At the door, they paused. You promised we'd talk, Lorenzo said. When it was over, I did. Aria turned to face him fully. Come in. They entered her room, and Aria moved to the window, looking out over the moonlit gardens. Lorenzo stood behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said quietly. For the lies, for using me, for all of it. I know, Lorenzo said. I don't expect you to. But I also don't know if I can walk away. She turned to face him. Because somewhere between that alley and tonight, I fell for you. The real you. Not the monster. Not the crime boss. The man who sits up pacing because he can't sleep. The man who keeps Elena's investigation alive because he can't let go. The man who would burn the world down to protect the people he loves. Lorenzo's eyes widened. Aria, I'm not done. She stepped closer. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I don't trust you. But I also can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting. She stopped, frustrated. I don't know what I want.
Then let me tell you what I want, Lorenzo said, his voice rough. I want to spend the rest of my life earning your trust. I want to wake up every morning and prove that I'm worth the risk. I want to love you the way you deserve to be loved. Honestly, completely, without reservations. He moved closer, framing her face with his hands. But more than anything, Aria Moretti, I want you to choose me. Not because of a contract, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to. Because you believe we could be something extraordinary together. Aria's heart hammered. And if I can't? If the damage is too deep? Then I'll let you go, Lorenzo said, and the pain in his eyes told her he meant it. The contract is void. You're free. You can walk away tonight, and I'll make sure you have everything you need to start over. New identity, money, protection, whatever you want. You'd really let me go? If that's what you need to be happy, yes. Even if it destroys me. Aria looked at him, really looked at him, saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the vulnerability, the desperate hope he was trying to hide. Saw the man who'd carried guilt for 3 years, who'd spent every night pacing, unable to sleep, who'd built walls so high even he couldn't climb over them. And she saw the man who'd held her when she cried, who'd kissed her like she was precious, who'd been willing to burn his world down to keep her safe. I don't want to leave, she whispered. Lorenzo's breath caught. What? I don't want to leave, she repeated, louder this time. I want to stay. I want to try. I want... She rose on her toes, closing the distance between them. I want you, Lorenzo Vitale. God help me, but I do. His kiss was everything, desperate and gentle, claiming and asking, taking and giving. His arms came around her, pulling her against him like he'd never let go. And Aria kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. All her anger and hope and fear and love. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I'm in love with you, Aria. Have been since that night at the gala when you challenged me. Maybe even before. Aria smiled through the tears streaming down her face. You're an idiot. Probably. Probably a manipulative, lying, impossible man. Definitely. And I love you too, she finished. Heaven help me, but I do. Lorenzo's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her toward the bed. Stay with me, he murmured against her lips. Not for a year, not because of a contract, but because you choose to. Every day. Every day, Aria agreed. And as Lorenzo's hands found the zipper of her dress, as they tumbled onto the bed together, Aria knew that this was just the beginning. They still had challenges ahead, Santoro to deal with, Mrs. Chen's daughter to find, trust to rebuild.
But for tonight, wrapped in Lorenzo's arms, she chose to believe in second chances. In love born from lies that had somehow become truth. In a future they would build together, one honest moment at a time.
Chapter 7. The Last Reckoning.
Aria woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close, and the warmth of Lorenzo's body beside her. For a moment, she just lay there, watching him sleep. His face was peaceful in a way she'd never seen when he was awake. No tension, no walls, no carefully maintained control. Just a man who'd finally let himself rest. Her man, she realized. Somehow, impossibly, this dangerous, complicated, infuriating man had become hers. His eyes opened, finding hers immediately. The smile that spread across his face was boyish, unguarded, beautiful. "Good morning," he murmured, pulling her closer. "Is it?" Aria asked, tracing the line of his jaw. "Or are we going to wake up and find out last night was a dream?" "If it was a dream, I don't want to wake up." Lorenzo kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "Stay here forever. Let the world outside handle itself." "Tempting," Aria said, "but we still have work to do. Mrs. Chen's daughter, Santoro, the rest of Isabella's operation." Lorenzo groaned, burying his face in her hair. "You're too responsible. It's very inconvenient." "Someone has to be," she pushed him playfully. "Come on. The sooner we finish this, the sooner we can—" His phone rang, shattering the moment. Lorenzo reached for it with a resigned sigh, but his expression changed when he saw the caller ID. "It's Agent Morrison," he answered on speaker. "Morrison, tell me you have good news." "Some." The agent's voice was grim. "Isabella's singing like a canary. We've got names, locations, shipping routes. Enough to dismantle her entire network. But there's a problem." Lorenzo sat up, tension returning to his shoulders. "What kind of problem?"
Santoro got wind of the arrest. He's cleaning house, eliminating anyone who might connect him to Isabella's operation. We've already found 3 bodies this morning. Aria felt ice flood her veins. "Mrs. Chen's daughter." "Exactly," Morrison confirmed. "If Santoro thinks the girl is a liability, he'll eliminate her. We're trying to locate her now, but Isabella was careful. The location changes weekly." "I can find her," Lorenzo said immediately. "Give me 2 hours. Vitale, if you're planning what I think you're planning—" 2 hours, Lorenzo repeated and ended the call. He was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. Aria watched him transform from the tender lover of moments ago into the cold-eyed crime boss she'd first met. "What are you planning?" she asked, though she suspected she knew. "Santoro has something I want. I have something he wants." Lorenzo pulled on his jacket. "We're going to make a trade." "A trade?" Aria's stomach dropped. "Lorenzo, what could you possibly have that Santoro—" She stopped, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. "No, absolutely not. It's the only way," Lorenzo said, not meeting her eyes. "You're not trading me for Mrs. Chen's daughter. I won't let you." "It's not your choice." His voice was flat, final. "Mrs. Chen served this house for 15 years. Her daughter is innocent. I'm not letting another innocent person die because of me." Aria grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "And what about me? You think I'll just let you hand me over to the man who tortured Elena? The man who wants to destroy you?" "I'll get you back," Lorenzo said, but his voice wavered. "I'll make the trade, get May to safety, and then—" "You'll what? Storm Santoro's compound? Fight your way through his men? Get yourself killed trying to rescue me?" Aria's voice rose. "That's your plan?" "Yes." Lorenzo cupped her face, and she saw the desperation in his eyes. "Because I can't live with myself if I don't try to save her, but I also can't live without you.
So I'll save her, and then I'll move heaven and earth to get you back, even if it kills me." "You're an idiot," Aria said, tears streaming down her face. "A noble, self-sacrificing idiot." "I know," he kissed her, desperate and tender. "But it's who I am, and you love me anyway." "Then let me help," Aria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "If we're doing this insane thing, we do it together, as partners." "Aria!" "Partners, Lorenzo. You don't get to shut me out now. Not after last night. Not after everything." She straightened her shoulders. "So, what's the real plan?" Lorenzo looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Marcus, get everyone together. We're going to war." The plan was audacious, dangerous, and probably suicidal, which meant it was exactly the kind of plan Lorenzo would come up with. They would make the trade, Aria for Mrs. Chen's daughter, but with modifications. Aria would wear a tracker, a wire, and an entire team of Lorenzo's best men would be positioned around the exchange point, ready to move the moment May was safe. "Santoro will expect a trap," Marcus pointed out as they reviewed the plan in Lorenzo's office. "He's not stupid." "He's also arrogant," Lorenzo countered. "He thinks he's won. Isabella's operation is exposed. I'm distracted trying to save some nobody's daughter, and he gets to take the woman who looks like Elena. In his mind, this is his ultimate victory." "What if he hurts her?" Mrs. Chen's voice was small. She'd been brought into the planning session, pale and shaking, but determined. "What if he does to Aria what he did to Elena?" "He won't have time," Lorenzo said, his voice hard. "The moment May is clear, we move. Aria will be back here within minutes." "And if something goes wrong?" Aria asked. "If he moves faster than you expect? If there are complications?" Lorenzo's hands clenched. "Then I burn his world down and pull you out of the ashes." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it made Aria's heart ache, because she knew what it really meant. Lorenzo would die trying to save her if necessary, would sacrifice everything for a chance to undo his failure with Elena. She couldn't let that happen. The exchange was set for an abandoned warehouse on the docks. Neutral territory, relatively isolated, multiple exit routes. The kind of place where terrible things happened and no one asked questions. Aria rode there in silence, Lorenzo's hand gripping hers so tightly it hurt. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? They'd said it all the night before, in whispers and kisses and the desperate way they'd held each other. The car stopped a block from the warehouse. Lorenzo turned to her, his expression tortured. "I can still call this off. We can find another way." "No, we can't," Aria said. "That girl is running out of time. We do this now." "I love you," Lorenzo said desperately. "If anything happens, nothing will happen." Aria kissed him, trying to memorize the feel of his lips. "I'll see you in a few minutes. And then we're going to go home and spend the rest of the day in bed. Promise?" "Promise." She climbed out of the car before she could change her mind, before the fear could overwhelm her. Marcus handed her the tracker, disguised as a simple bracelet, and checked the wire hidden in her clothes one last time. "We'll be right here," Marcus said quietly. "The moment we have the girl, we're coming for you. Hold on for just a few minutes." Aria nodded and walked toward the warehouse, every step feeling like a mile. The building loomed ahead, dark and menacing. She could see figures moving inside, Santoro's men, no doubt, armed, dangerous, waiting. She stepped through the door into darkness. Marco Santoro stood in the center of the warehouse, flanked by 6 men with guns, and beside him, bound to a chair and gagged, was a young woman who had to be Mei Chen. She was alive. Terrified, bruised, but alive.
"Aria Moretti," Santoro said, his voice jovial. "Or should I say Aria Vitale? I heard you got married. Congratulations."
"Let her go," Aria said, nodding toward May. "That was the deal."
In a moment. Santoro circled her slowly, studying her like a predator sizing a prey. "First, I want to understand something. Why? Why would Lorenzo trade you for some nobody's daughter? What makes you so valuable to him?" "I look like Elena," Aria said flatly. "You know that. Everyone knows that." "Yes, but it's more than that, isn't it?" Santoro stopped in front of her. "He's in love with you. Actually in love. I can see it in the desperation of this trade. He'd burn his empire down to get you back." "Then you should let me go," Aria said, "before he does exactly that." "Huh, let you go. No, Cara, I'm going to keep you. Use you. Break Lorenzo Vitale the way he should have been broken 3 years ago." He nodded to his men. "Release the girl." 2 of Santoro's men cut May's bonds. She stumbled to her feet, swaying. One of them pushed her toward the door. "Run," Santoro called after her. "Tell Lorenzo I have his precious wife. Tell him if he wants her back, he'll give me everything. His territories, his businesses, his life." May ran, disappearing through the door. Aria counted silently. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Any second now, Lorenzo and his men would burst through those doors. But instead, an explosion rocked the building. The lights went out, gunfire erupting outside. And Santoro smiled. "Did you really think I wouldn't plan for Lorenzo's rescue attempt?" Santoro grabbed Aria's arm, dragging her toward a back exit. "I've been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Your precious husband just walked into a trap." Aria struggled, but Santoro was stronger. His men surrounded them, creating a barrier of bodies as they moved through dark corridors. The sounds of fighting grew louder. Gunfire, shouting, the metallic clang of something heavy falling. "Lorenzo!" Aria screamed, not caring that it gave away her position. "Lorenzo!" "He can't hear you," Santoro said. "He's too busy dying." They burst into what looked like a loading dock. A van waited, engine running. Santoro threw Aria toward it. Then a gunshot cracked through the air. One of Santoro's men dropped. Then another. Someone was shooting from the shadows. Precise, deadly shots that took down target after target. Santoro cursed, using Aria as a shield. "Show yourself, Vitale!" But it wasn't Lorenzo who stepped into the light. It was a woman, dark-haired, petite, holding a gun with professional ease. She looked so much like Elena, like Aria, that for a moment everyone froze. "Hello, Marco," the woman said, her voice cold as winter. "Remember me? I'm Sophia Russo, Elena's sister, and I've been waiting 3 years for this." Santoro's grip on Aria loosened in shock. "You're dead! Lorenzo said—" "Lorenzo lied. I've been in witness protection, yes, but training, learning, preparing for the day I could make you pay for what you did to my sister." Sophia's gun never wavered. "Let her go." "Or what? You'll shoot me, with Aria in the way?" "No," said another voice. Lorenzo emerged from the shadows, covered in dust and blood, but very much alive. "She'll shoot you, because I'm going to move Aria out of the way." Everything happened at once. Lorenzo lunged forward, grabbing Aria and yanking her away from Santoro. Sophia fired. Santoro screamed.
The bullet hit Santoro's shoulder, not fatal, but enough to drop him. Lorenzo's men swarmed in, surrounding him, weapons trained. And Lorenzo held Aria against him, his whole body shaking. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you. You're safe." Aria clung to him, unable to speak, unable to process what had just happened. She'd thought he was dead. The explosion, the gunfire, she'd been certain she'd lost him. "You're alive," she finally managed. "You're alive. I promised you a day in bed, remember?" His laugh was shaky. "I don't break promises." Agent Morrison arrived with FBI backup 20 minutes later. Santoro was taken into custody, raging and threatening until the moment they put him in the van. His remaining men surrendered without a fight. Sophia stood apart from the chaos, her gun finally lowered. Lorenzo approached her carefully. "You saved her," he said. "Thank you." "I saved myself," Sophia corrected. "Elena would have wanted me to help, to make sure no one else died because of Santoro." She looked at Aria, and something softened in her expression. "You look like her, but you're stronger. Elena was never strong enough for this world." "Neither am I," Aria admitted. "Yes, you are." Sophia holstered her gun. "You survived Isabella and Santoro. You chose to be bait. You walked into a trap knowing you might not walk out. That's not weakness. That's courage." Lorenzo's arm tightened around Aria. "Will you come back? To the house? There's room for you if you want it." Sophia shook her head. "No. That house holds too many ghosts. Elena's ghost, my grief. I need to make my own way now." She smiled slightly. "But maybe I'll visit, when things are less complicated." "Things are always complicated in our world," Lorenzo said. "Then maybe when you've made it less complicated." Sophia looked at them both. "Be happy, both of you. Elena would have wanted that." She walked away, disappearing into the crowd of federal agents and police. Aria watched her go, feeling like she'd just met a ghost made flesh. Back at the estate, Mrs. Chen was reunited with her daughter. The moment was private, tender, full of tears and apologies and fierce embraces. Lorenzo gave them space, leading Aria to his office instead. "It's over," he said, sinking into his chair. "Isabella arrested. Santoro in custody. Elena's killers brought to justice. It's finally over." Aria moved to stand behind him, her hands on his shoulders. "How do you feel?" "Empty," Lorenzo admitted. "I've spent 3 years focused on this, on revenge, on justice. Now that it's done, I don't know what to do with myself." "You could try living," Aria suggested. "Actually living, not just surviving or seeking revenge." Lorenzo reached up, taking her hand. "With you? If you want me." He pulled her around to face him, his eyes intense. "Want you? Aria, I need you. I've needed you since that night in the alley, maybe before. You're the only thing that's made sense in 3 years of chaos." "Good," she kissed him softly, "because I'm not going anywhere. The contract might be void, but I'm choosing to stay, choosing you, every single day." "Every day," Lorenzo echoed, pulling her into his lap. "For the rest of our lives." "The rest of our lives," Aria agreed. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other, letting the reality of survival and victory sink in. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the estate in shades of gold and amber. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Lorenzo's empire to manage, relationships to rebuild, a life to create together. But for now, wrapped in each other's arms, they had everything they needed. Love, trust, and the promise of a future neither of them had dared to hope for.
But that night, as Aria drifted off to sleep in Lorenzo's bed, their bed now, she heard him whisper something into her hair. "Marry me. Not because of a contract. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Because you choose me." Aria smiled against his chest, her heart full. "Ask me again tomorrow," she murmured, "when I'm awake enough to give you a proper answer." His laughter rumbled through his chest. "I'll ask you every day until you say yes." "Then I guess you'll only have to ask once," Aria said, and kissed him goodnight.
Epilogue: A Marriage Without Contracts. 1 year later. The chapel overlooking the Amalfi Coast was small, intimate, and absolutely perfect. Aria stood in the bride's room, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. The dress was simpler than the one she'd worn to the first ceremony, the contract ceremony that had bound her to Lorenzo legally, but not emotionally. This one was ivory silk that flowed like water, with delicate lace at the shoulders and a train that whispered across the stone floor. This time she'd chosen it herself. This time everything was her choice. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Chen said from the doorway, her eyes bright with tears. "Mr. Vitale won't be able to breathe when he sees you." Aria smiled, turning away from the mirror. "How is he? Nervous?" "Terrified, I think." Mrs. Chen moved into the room, carrying a small velvet box. "Though he's trying to hide it. He keeps pacing and checking his watch, even though we have an hour before the ceremony." "That sounds like Lorenzo," Aria said fondly. The man who commanded an empire with ruthless efficiency turned into a bundle of nerves when it came to personal matters. It was endearing, really. Mrs. Chen opened the box, revealing a pearl necklace that glowed with the soft luster of age. "These belonged to Mr. Vitale's grandmother. He wanted you to wear them today, said they should be worn by the woman who brings light back to this family." Aria's throat tightened. She touched the pearls gently, feeling the weight of history and love in them. "He said that?" "He says many things when you're not around," Mrs. Chen smiled, fastening the necklace around Aria's throat. "He talks about you constantly, how you've changed him, how you make him want to be better, how he can't imagine his life without you." "He tells me that too," Aria admitted. "Every night before we fall asleep, every morning when we wake up, sometimes in the middle of the day for no reason at all." "Good." Mrs. Chen stepped back, examining her handiwork. "You deserve to be loved like that, openly, completely, without reservations." A knock at the door interrupted them. Vivian entered, elegant as ever in a pale blue dress. Behind her came Sophia, looking uncomfortable in formal wear, but smiling nonetheless. "The guests are arriving," Vivian announced. "We have about 30 minutes before the processional begins. How are you feeling, my dear?" "Ready," Aria said, and meant it. "More ready than I've ever been for anything." Sophia moved to stand beside her, and for a moment the resemblance between them was striking. 3 women who all looked like Elena, each carrying her memory in different ways. "Elena would have liked you," Sophia said quietly. "She would have been happy that Lorenzo found someone who makes him smile again." "I hope so," Aria replied. "I never wanted to replace her." "You didn't. You couldn't." Sophia touched Aria's hand gently. "But you gave him permission to move forward, to live again. That's a gift Elena would have wanted him to have." The ceremony was held as the sun began its descent toward the Mediterranean. Golden light streamed through the chapel's arched windows, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. The guests, a carefully curated mix of family, friends, and allies, filled the small space with warmth and anticipation. Agent Morrison was there, surprisingly. He'd become an unlikely friend over the past year, helping Lorenzo transition some of his less legal enterprises into legitimate businesses. The FBI agent gave Aria a supportive nod as she entered. Marcus stood as Lorenzo's best man, his usually stern face softened with something that might have been happiness. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row beside her daughter Mi, both of them dabbing at their eyes. And at the altar, waiting with barely concealed impatience, stood Lorenzo. He looked devastating in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. But it wasn't the expensive clothes that made Aria's breath catch. It was the expression on his face when he saw her. Pure, undisguised love mixed with awe and gratitude and something that looked like disbelief, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real. She walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. Her father had caused enough damage in life. He didn't deserve a place in this moment of joy. This was her choice, her decision, her life to build. When she reached Lorenzo, he took her hands, and she felt the slight tremor in his fingers. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he whispered back, his voice rough. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "You clean up pretty well yourself," she teased, trying to lighten the moment before they both started crying. The priest began the ceremony, but Aria barely heard the words. She was too focused on Lorenzo's eyes, on the way he looked at her like she was the center of his universe, on the slight smile that played at his lips. When it came time for vows, Lorenzo cleared his throat. They'd written their own, no traditional promises, but something more personal, more true. "Aria," Lorenzo began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "A year ago, I made you sign a contract. I told you it was business. I told you it was strategy. I told you everything except the truth. That from the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. A strength I'd forgotten existed, a light I'd thought was lost forever." He squeezed her hands gently. "I've made many mistakes in my life. I've hurt people. I've chosen vengeance over mercy, pride over love. But choosing you, falling in love with you, that's the one thing I got right. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. You make me believe in second chances, in redemption, in a future worth fighting for." Tears streamed down Aria's face, but she didn't care. Let everyone see. Let them know how much this man meant to her. "So today," Lorenzo continued, "I'm not asking you to sign a contract. I'm not offering you a deal or making demands. I'm simply asking you to be my wife, my partner, my equal, for as long as you'll have me. And I promise you this, I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the gift you've given me, the gift of your trust, your forgiveness, your love." Aria took a shaky breath, composing herself enough to speak. "Lorenzo, when we met, I was drowning, not just in my father's deaths, but in hopelessness, in the belief that my life would never be more than survival. You pulled me out of that alley, and yes, you lied to me. You manipulated me. You made me question everything." He saw him flinch slightly, but she pressed on. "But you also challenged me. You made me stronger. You showed me that I could be more than a victim of my father's choices. You gave me the opportunity to choose my own path, and every day I choose you."
"You're not perfect," Aria said, smiling through her tears. "You're controlling and stubborn, and sometimes you forget that I can take care of myself. But you're also brave and loyal and capable of more love than you give yourself credit for. You're my home, Lorenzo. Not this house or this life, but you. Just you. So I promise you this," she continued. "I will stand beside you through whatever comes. I will challenge you when you need challenging and support you when you need support.
I will love you on the good days and the bad days and all the complicated days in between. Not because a contract says I have to, but because I choose to. Every single day for the rest of my life. Lorenzo's composure finally cracked. A tear escaped, tracking down his cheek, and Aria reached up to wipe it away. The priest smiled, clearly moved by their words. "The rings, please." Marcus produced 2 simple platinum bands. No diamonds, no ostentation, just clean, elegant circles that would last a lifetime. Lorenzo slid the ring onto Aria's finger, his hands steady now. "With this ring, I choose you. Today and always." Aria repeated the gesture, placing the band on his finger. "With this ring, I choose you. Today and always." Then, by the power vested in me, the priest said, his voice warm, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Lorenzo pulled Aria into his arms, and the kiss was everything. Tender and passionate, promising and celebrating, an ending and a beginning all at once. The chapel erupted in applause, but Aria barely heard it over the pounding of her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "Mrs. Vitale," he murmured, "for real this time." "For real," Aria agreed. "No contracts, no deals, just us." "Just us," Lorenzo echoed, and kissed her again. The reception was held in the garden of a villa Lorenzo had rented for the week. String lights hung between olive trees, a small orchestra played soft Italian melodies, and tables laden with food and wine dotted the terrace lawn. It was intimate, only about 50 guests, but it felt perfect. No cameras, no press, no political maneuvering, just people who genuinely cared about them, celebrating their happiness. During the dinner, toasts were made. Marcus stood, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I've worked for Lorenzo Vitale for 15 years, he began, his voice gruff. "In that time, I've seen him at his best and his worst. I've seen him build an empire. I've seen him lose people he loved. I've seen him consumed by grief and revenge." He looked at Aria, his expression softening. "But I've never seen him happy. Not truly happy. Not until you, Aria. You've given him something I didn't think he could have again. Hope. A future. The ability to smile without shadows in his eyes." Marcus raised his glass. "So, here's to the woman who tamed the beast, outsmarted the criminal mastermind, and had the courage to love a man who didn't think he deserved it. May you have a lifetime of happiness together." The guests echoed the toast, glasses clinking in the warm evening air. Later, as the sun set and the music shifted to something slower, Lorenzo led Aria onto the makeshift dance floor. They moved together easily now, no longer the awkward strangers from that first gala, but partners who knew each other's rhythms. "Happy?" Lorenzo asked, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Deliriously," Aria admitted, "though I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be too good to be true." "It won't be perfect," Lorenzo said honestly. "We'll fight, we'll have bad days. I'll probably drive you crazy with my overprotective tendencies." "Probably," Aria laughed. "Definitely." "But we'll figure it out," Lorenzo continued. "Together, like we figured out everything else." "Together," Aria agreed, resting her head against his chest. "I like the sound of that." They danced in silence for a moment, lost in each other and the music and the perfect Italian evening. "There's something I need to tell you," Aria said finally. Lorenzo pulled back to look at her, concern flickering across his face. "What is it?" "I enrolled in college," she said. "Online classes to start, but I want to finish my degree. Maybe go to law school eventually.
I want to help people like I was helped, people trapped by circumstances they can't control. Lorenzo's expression transformed into pure pride. That's wonderful. When do you start? Next month. I know it might be difficult with everything else, but...
But nothing, Lorenzo interrupted. You should do it. You should do everything you've ever wanted to do. I'll support you in whatever way you need. Even if it means I'm too busy to attend every business dinner? Aria asked, testing. Even then, you're not my accessory, Aria. You're my partner, and partners support each other's dreams. He smiled. Besides, I've been thinking about stepping back from some of the business myself, letting Marcus handle more of the day-to-day operations, focusing on the legitimate enterprises and leaving the shadier stuff behind. Aria's eyebrows rose. Really? You do that? I've spent enough years building an empire, Lorenzo said. Maybe it's time I focus on building a life instead. A real life, with you. What would we do with all that free time? Aria asked, her eyes sparkling. Travel? Read? Learn to cook? God knows we both need that skill. Maybe even... He stopped, suddenly looking uncertain. Maybe even what? Maybe even start a family, Lorenzo said quietly. If you want that. I know we haven't really discussed it, and I don't want to pressure you, but... Aria kissed him, cutting off his nervous rambling. Someday, she said when they broke apart. Not right now. I want you to myself for a while. But someday. I think you'd make an amazing father. Lorenzo's smile could have lit up the entire coast. Someday, he agreed. I can live with that. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Aria found herself standing at the edge of the terrace, looking out over the Mediterranean. The moon painted a silver path across the water, and stars filled the sky in a way they never did in the city. Sophia appeared beside her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. She offered one to Aria. Thank you, Aria said, accepting the glass. And thank you for being here. I know it wasn't easy. It was easier than I thought it would be, Sophia admitted. I thought seeing Lorenzo marry someone else would hurt, would feel like a betrayal of Elena. But it doesn't. It feels right. She looked at Aria, her expression thoughtful. Elena loved Lorenzo, but she loved the idea of him more than the reality. She wanted the fairy tale, the handsome prince, the happy ending, the perfect life. She wasn't built for the darkness that comes with this world. But you are, Sophia continued. You face that darkness and come through it. You and Lorenzo understand each other in a way Elena and Lorenzo never could have. That's not a betrayal. That's growth. Evolution. It's exactly what Elena would have wanted for him. Aria felt tears prick her eyes again. I hope you find that too. Someone who understands you. Sophia smiled. Maybe someday. For now, I'm content with my work, helping the FBI dismantle what's left of Isabella's network, making sure no one else suffers the way Elena did. That's important work, Aria said. It is, and it gives me purpose. Sophia clinked her glass against Aria's. To purpose. To love. To second chances. To second chances, Aria echoed, and drank. Later, much later, when the last guest had left and the staff had cleaned up, Lorenzo and Aria stood alone in the villa's master bedroom. The doors were open to the balcony, letting in the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the sound of waves against rocks below. Mrs. Vitale, Lorenzo said, pulling her into his arms, how does it feel to be legally, officially, irrevocably mine? Like I've finally come home, Aria said honestly. What about you, Mr. Vitale? How does it feel to be legally, officially, irrevocably mine? Like I've been given a gift I don't deserve, but will spend the rest of my life trying to earn. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. Like maybe, despite everything I've done, I'm allowed to be happy. You are, Aria assured him. We both are. We fought for this, Lorenzo. We earned it. She reached up, unfastening the buttons of his shirt one by one. Now stop talking and take me to bed.
We have a whole week in Italy, and I intend to make the most of it. Lorenzo's laugh was warm and full of promise. As you wish, Mrs. Vitale. He swept her into his arms, carrying her to the bed as she laughed. The sound of her joy mixed with the crash of waves below, creating a symphony of happiness that neither of them had thought they'd ever hear again. And much later, wrapped in each other's arms as moonlight painted silver patterns across their skin, Aria whispered into the darkness, "Thank you." Lorenzo, already half asleep, murmured, "For what?" "For giving me a choice, for letting me choose you, for choosing me back." His arms tightened around her. "Always," he whispered, "I'll always choose you. In every lifetime, in every universe, in every possible version of this story, I'll always choose you." Aria smiled against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her cheek. Outside, the Mediterranean stretched endlessly toward horizons full of possibility. Inside, they had everything they needed. A love built on honesty instead of lies. A future chosen instead of forced. A partnership of equals instead of a contract of convenience. And as Aria drifted off to sleep in the arms of the man she'd married, truly married this time, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The alley where it started. The lies and the truth and everything in between. The danger they'd faced and overcome together. She'd signed Lorenzo's contract expecting 1 year of servitude. Instead, she'd found a lifetime of love. She'd walked into his beautiful prison expecting to be a captive. Instead, she'd found freedom. She'd thought she was being used as bait for a ghost. Instead, she'd helped lay that ghost to rest and found her own place in Lorenzo's heart. The contract that had brought them together was void now, burned in a symbolic gesture the week after Isabella's arrest. But the vows they'd spoken today, those would last forever. Because some promises weren't written on paper, some promises were written on the heart. And Aria and Lorenzo had promised each other everything that mattered. Honesty, partnership, and love without conditions. No contracts needed, just choice. Every single day. The end.